Chapter 493. There was no navigator, no anemometer, everything was judged by sight, and these two damned goblins had the guts to drive the airship into the clouds without hesitation. There were a few times when Duque saw cliffs suddenly appear on the side of the airship, but it was Duque who rushed up to steer the airship to prevent it from being destroyed and killed. At that moment, the two stupid goblins were still trying to fix the hole in the balloon. Duque, who could not take it anymore, had already prepared for the worst. He directly gave the control of activating the ice barrier to the system elf. Because he could not guarantee that he would have the concentration and reflexes to open the ice barrier at the critical moment to save his life. If the secret of his resurrection was discovered by Deathwing, then he would be in deep trouble. As expected, the two goblins were busy repairing the structure. These two fellows with boundless hearts even dozed off from time to time, completely ignoring the dangers that were just inches away from them, such as a sudden air leak, a sudden descent from a high altitude, or the possibility of a mountain being installed and so on. Just like that, Duque endured an entire day, and then a sleepless night. For the whole day, Duque almost did not eat or drink anything. Because he would vomit if he drank, and he would vomit even more if he ate. Duque almost suspected that Deathwing deliberately made him suffer so that his will would be weakened, and the hypnosis would be completed as soon as possible. But the next morning, Duque changed his mind. The first light of dawn appeared, and the clouds around them gradually disappeared. So much so that Duque felt that the airship had finally sailed from the sea into the sky. There was no thick fog, and everything within 10 kilometers was clearly visible. The large forest under his feet turned into a rugged, uninhabited wilderness, and he could see that the terrain in front of him was gradually rising, all the way to the cliffs of grim battle. Along the way, there were indeed a few small forests along the way, but the overall coverage was quite sparse. People walking in the wilderness would be very conspicuous, and the orc dragon riders could easily see their traces from a few kilometers away. None of the orc dragon riders were interested in the airship that Duque was in. The most recent time, a red dragon even flew less than 500 meters away, and the orc dragon riders on it did not even look at the airship. Even when he flew past, the airship's steam engine made a loud explosion. It seemed like the orcs were used to the gnomes working for the horde for money. Or it could be said that they completely looked down on these little green dwarves who were loyal to the tribe for the sake of the yellow metal. It was a good move for Orgrim to bribe the goblins with the gold he obtained from conquering the human capital. The beastmen didn't want it, but the goblins wanted it. The two sides almost hit it off. Duque narrowed his eyes. He was thinking about how his team of 4 was going to pass this place. After a day and a night of flying, grim battle was quite close to them. Sasha and the others who were following carefully on their griffins were also getting closer. At this moment, a major event that did not belong to the original history happened. In the Dalajan city, the kings of the 6 human kingdoms, plus Prince Kudran, Wildhammer, and Kale, that's a total of 8 leaders were gathered together. Something big must have happened for so many big shots to gather together. Prince Drake Proudmoore, the next king of the maritime kingdom Kurtiras, died in battle. Dalajan Kiran Tor council member Gastala Malo died in battle. Silver Moon council member Balamind Kez died in battle. Former leader of the Bloodsail Pirates and current deputy commander of the Stormwind Fleet, Duke Fairville died in battle. Along with the deaths of these 4 countries, there were also shocking losses. The culprits were the ancient red dragons led by Tyrannies Terranistas. Every place where 3 or more kings sat could be called a throne room. Now, in the throne room, King Dalin Proudmoore's roar resounded. Calm down? Lothar, you're asking me to calm down? Now the one whose son died is not you, but me. You're asking me to believe in Duque. Alright, I've waited for him for 2 weeks. Every day, every night, my men and I had to brave the threat of those damned lizards and patrol the sea. Now it's all over. This is the result of waiting. Dalin threw out a piece of metal that was mainly gold and had been completely deformed by the flames. This thing made a clanging sound as it hit the floor tiles of the hall. The sound of it bouncing and rolling on the floor pounded everyone's heart. Almost no one could recognize that it was a scimitar. Dalin cried, the next king of Kurtiras has been sacrificed. He was burned to ashes by a ball of fire right in front of me. This is all Drake has left." Lothar was speechless. If not for the fact that Stormwind had also lost a duke, who knew how crazy King Daelin would have been. Now, this hero of the sea who fought on the battlefield almost every day since the start of the war and gave his all for the alliance was sitting on the floor tiles in front of the throne, bawling his eyes out. Yes, at this moment, there was no king, no admiral galloping on the blue waves of the sea, only a father who had lost his son. As the attack of the Red Dragons became fiercer, the leaders of the alliance who originally wanted to defend the Red Dragon army did not dare to say a word. After all, the alliance with the Red Dragon army was a thing of the past. The attack of the ancient Red Dragon was a real threat now. Every king had a bad look on their faces. King Tyrrhenus asked in a deep voice, "Is there still no news from our deputy commander?" Silence was the only reply. Croesus, who stood beside Antonidas, wanted to say something, but in the end, he remained silent. He had already received the news that Ronan had sent him. Croesus tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. His most admired queen was still locked up in prison. But the wings of death intervened. That was the wings of death, the one that caused the entire dragon race to fall into civil strife and the verge of collapse. Perhaps if the most powerful magicians of the human race were gathered together, they would be able to fight against it. But only to the point of fighting. Croesus did not think that humans had the ability to kill Nethario. Croesus did not think that humans and elves could do what no dragon had done in the past 10,000 years. After all, that was no longer the realm of mortals. So Croesus chose to remain silent. His mind was filled with the things that happened these days. The news from Duque Ronan made him understand that Duque had reached the pinnacle of mortals. Now it was up to him to find help against the wings of death. But these days, he had hit a wall for the second time. When Croesus came back to his senses, the discussion of the kings in the hall seemed to have come to a conclusion. "Then it's decided. We will send a large assault team to save the Red Dragon Queen, or kill her," Tyrrhenus announced. Chapter 494. The roars in the throne room were still echoing in his ears. "I object. Marcus is already on his way to save Alexstrasza. We should always trust our deputy commander," King Lang retorted angrily like an injured lion. "I've always trusted him. I gave him 2 whole weeks. But when my son died in battle, he still hadn't gotten rid of those damned red lizards." Daelin retorted mercilessly. The eyes of the Lion of the Sea, who had just lost his crown prince, were horribly bloodshot. Lang was speechless. If it were him, he would also go crazy if anything happened to William. Daelin continued to roar, and the scorching sound waves echoed in the hall. "Look at what he's done in the past 14 days. Hundreds and thousands of soldiers at the front line die in the flames every day, but he spent 14 days on a path that could have been reached by griffins or teleportation portals. There's no progress report, no regular communication, and we don't even know if he's alive or not. How do you expect me and the kings in the throne room to continue trusting him? But, our deputy commander who's cursed with death is sacrificing the alliance's trust in him," King Xian said, hitting the nail on the head. This made Lang's heart skip a beat. Since the start of the war, which country hasn't sacrificed anything? War is bound to be accompanied by sacrifices. Antonidas tried to persuade Lang to give up on Duque. Lang's body trembled. To him and Stormwind, he and Lothar were destined to grow old, and they would have to hand over the country to William, Bolvar, and Duque in the future. And Duque was definitely Stormwind's hope of reviving the country. Be it emotionally or rationally, he did not want to believe that Duque would fail and fall. Anduin could not stand it anymore. At least wait for the last communication. He promised to send a magical message every 3 days. Tyrrhenus replied in a businesslike manner, "Sure, but I hope that you will put the alliance first and allow us to form a large assault force." "If there's no news of the deputy commander?" Anduin Lothar gritted his teeth. "I agree. Things were not over yet." Next up, since Deputy Commander-in-Chief Duke Marcus is unable to carry out his duties, I propose that the Alliance appoint another Deputy Commander-in-Chief, coordinating the actions of the various nations. Jean suddenly raised his hand and said. Lang and Andoan's pupils constricted. What the hell was Gilnis doing? Or could it be that the old bastard Xian had already formed some sort of secret alliance with Turinas? To be honest, without Duque around, there was indeed a problem with the coordination of the alliance. As Andoan's assistant, Turayan temporarily took over Duque's work, but the results were not ideal. Turayan had good leadership skills, but he was unable to handle logistics, troop mobilization, and warfare all by himself like Duque. It had been a year since the alliance had been established. This was no longer the situation where all the kingdoms refused to submit to each other and needed to find a neutral party to take the blame. In the absence of Duque, Turayan's reputation was not enough to convince the masses. That was the most fatal problem. He had never led an army on his own, and he did not have extraordinary bravery or a suitable title. It could be said that Turayan was treated rather negatively by the kings of the kingdoms when he carried out his work. Moreover, in actual combat, there were often situations where the troops had to be split up. One deputy commander was indeed not enough. In the end, High Lord Alexandros Mograine from Rotterdam was elected as the second deputy commander with a high number of votes. In theory, he was ranked below Duque, but every king knew that once it was confirmed that Duque was dead, Mograine would be the actual deputy commander. When they returned to the state guest house, Lang flew into a rage, which was rare for him. Andoan, that bastard Turinas is trying to make you a mere figurehead. Lothar was silent for a long time. If it's for the sake of the Alliance's victory, I can accept it. I'm afraid that the old bastard is not just doing it for the sake of the Alliance's victory. Lang swept everything on the table to the ground. This was no longer a conspiracy, it was an overt plot. Yes, everyone realized that Rotterdam had changed. In the beginning, everyone from Rotterdam thought that they were the saviors of the world, and that they would save the ignorant people from all the kingdoms and join this seemingly distant war. However, when the horde burned down the Silver Pine Forest and threatened the holy capital, Stratholm, and even fought their way to Rotterdam, everything changed when the Rotterdam people's dignity was mercilessly trampled on. It was no longer the atmosphere of, no matter what happens at the border, we will still sing and dance in peace. Instead, the whole country showed a hysterical and unreasonable stubbornness. Revenge. Not only did he want a bloody revenge. Moreover, they had to win the battle beautifully. It was a great victory that required the worship of 6 human kingdoms, 2 dwarf kingdoms, and 1 elf kingdom, as well as all of the 9 kingdoms. Turinas was so proud of his team of thieves, but they had failed. Finally, Turinas had waited for this opportunity. The worst thing was that as the leader of the alliance, Rotterdam, had set a very bad precedent. Just as Lang was throwing a tantrum, the guard sent a message saying that Duque's maid was asking to see him. Duque's maid? Yes, we've all seen her. Her name is Vanessa Van Cleef. Van Cleef? Lang, of course, remembered this surname. It was one of the 2 heroes who helped the people of Stormwind obtain a base of operations behind enemy lines. Let her in. Vanessa entered and said something that made Lang furious. Your Majesty, please save my master's disciple, Miss Alicia Barev. The nobles of Rotterdam want to force her into marriage. What? Lang and Andoan lost their voices at the same time. Almost everyone in the alliance knew about the relationship between Duque and Alicia. Alicia, who had become Duque's right-hand man, appeared on many occasions as Duque's spokesperson. For example, she represented Duque at Kuel Salas's diplomatic banquets. No one in Stormwind would have thought that Rotterdam would make a move on Alicia after losing contact with Duque. From Vanessa's angry narration, Lang and Andoan understood the whole story. In the end, it was just one sentence. Turinas had his eyes on the land of Alterac. Rotterdam was hurt. The nobles of Rotterdam not only desired glory and blood for revenge, they also desired real benefits. The bloodline of King Eden had been severed. Eden himself had betrayed the alliance and humanity, and would eventually be nailed to the pillar of shame. The last obstacle to controlling Alterac was Duke Barav. There was news that the Duke's 2 sons had joined the horde, but this news was not confirmed. Chapter 495. But now, all of Alterac's soldiers were fighting for the alliance in order to wash away this humiliation. At this time, a rubbish baron from a small family that was not ranked in Rotterdam proposed to the Barav family, hoping to marry Alicia. I am a descendant of the noble Arthi, the Pavan family of East Tiraspol. Our Baron Bas Pavan sincerely proposed to Alicia for 1,000 gold coins. If the Barav family desires the protection of Rotterdam, then a marriage alliance with our family is your best and only choice. Vanessa angrily mimicked the tone of the messenger. The pitifully small betrothal gift and the arrogant words made it seem as if he, a mere baron, was condescending to marry Alicia. Ryan was already infuriated by Vanessa's retelling of the story. How dare the people of Rotterdam do this? Andoin roared, his long hair fluttering due to his intense movements like a lion's mane. Alicia is not only Duque's woman. She is also my earl. A rubbish viscount dares to do this. Lang was the one who agreed to confer the title on Alicia. Although it was a frontline conferment, there was an official conferment process, and it was announced to all the countries in the alliance. No wonder Lang slammed the table on the spot. That bastard dares. Miss Alicia clearly objected. But Duke Barav was silent for a long time, and did not object or accept, only saying that he would consider it. That's right, Alicia did not belong to Alterac in theory. But as long as the blood of the Barav family flowed in her body, she could not completely escape the shackles of the Barav family. The people of Rotterdam knew this, and found a loophole to propose to Duke Barav directly, instead of going through the Stormwind. The flames of anger ignited in the hearts of the king and the minister, and along with the strong beating of their hearts, it poured into the main arteries and into every corner of their bodies. It was rare for the guards to realize that their 2 bosses were angry. It was the kind of thunderous rage that was ignited. If this is a test by Tarina's. Lang raised his fist. Then let's go tell him our answer together. Andoin's fist collided with Lang's. At this moment, a guard suddenly rushed in. Your Majesty, this is an emergency. Near South Shore, General Windsor led his private legion to attack the camp of the Rotterdam people. What? Lang was shocked. And Bolvar and Tom? Asked Anduin. Duke Verdragon is at the wall of Saladin. General Seamus went to inspect the Jasper mine. Lang and his childhood friend looked at each other and immediately understood that they had to go together to suppress the situation. In fact, when Vanessa came to the Dalajan to meet King Lang, Duque's men were in an uproar. Because it was a secret operation, Duque did not take most of his men with him. After hearing the news, Makarov and Duke's cavalier Captain Kasser immediately led their men to seek justice. What was the concept of 100 knights? A weaker duke could not even afford to keep 100 knights. One could imagine how shocking it was when 100 fully armed Highland knights went to the camp of the Rotterdam nobles. Because of the recent attack by the Red Dragon, the camps of the various countries were almost all set up together. This was to gather a limited number of ballistae, archers, and mages to better deal with the wyvern. Also because it was located at the rear, the camps of the various countries were separated by the simplest wooden fences. In fact, before the knights reached the camp of the Rotterdam nobles, the people of Rotterdam had already discovered them. After all, they were too big a target. The soldiers guarding the camp looked over in confusion, then froze for a moment, and their faces darkened. The soldiers of Rotterdam who were doing their own things in the camp were also stunned. Go back, you Stormwind people, this is not your turf. The guard yelled angrily. Before he could finish his words, Cass had already rushed forward and immediately shouted, "Get the Pavan out first." Without needing to say anything, the knights next to him threw a few grappling hooks over. There was no need for the people of Rotterdam to open the gate. A magnificent group of 6 knights separated to the left and right, and the ropes tied to the saddles pulled the grappling hooks. With a loud bang, the wooden gate of the Rotterdam nobles' camp was blown away. The collapsing gate smashed onto the back of the guard who had shouted, and the immense force caused the guard who weighed close to 100 kilograms to fall to the ground like a tortoise. When Casa and the rest of the 90 knights rushed into the camp, the soldiers of Rotterdam only then realized that the Southerners had rebelled. How dare they rush into Rotterdam's camp? One by one, they put down what they were doing, and surrounded the knights in anger. But who was Casa? He was an elite Highland knight who had been trained in Arthi. If not for Salas who could not support so many knights, would he have come to serve Duque? In the world of magic, knights were rather fragile, but to these ordinary soldiers, they were all existences at the level of a father. With a sudden thrust of his lance, he stabbed a soldier of Rotterdam who tried to stop him, causing him to vomit blood. Why did he vomit blood and not stab him to death? Because Casa did not completely lose his mind. He and his men were all using blunt wooden lances that were used for practice. However, the huge impact hit the guy's iron armor, causing him to vomit blood and fly backward. He fell to the ground and could not get up for a long time. The people of Rotterdam were stunned. Without stopping at all, the 100 cavalrymen were like one person, charging straight towards the tent with the banner of the Paven family. A knight pulled out his blunt sword and slashed the shoulder of a Rotterdam man who tried to stop him. There was also a knight holding a shield and slamming it with it. Of course, Casa was the best at fighting. When he reached the place, he immediately grabbed the person in question. He grabbed the bastard who dreamed of being a baron and the daughter of a duke, and greeted him with punches. Originally, Casa was tall and strong. With his iron gauntlets on his fists, he felt that the guy was going further and further down the road of ugliness with every punch. The knights were really angry. They picked up the things beside them and smashed them on the heads of the Paven family people. How many soldiers could there be in a small family with only one baron and 2 viscounts? Except for the 2 knights and more than 20 professional spearmen, they were all farmers. After Casa knocked the baron named Bus to the ground, he continued to kick him. Go to hell. Bastard, you want to marry our countess for 1,000 gold coins. A dog wants to eat dragon meat? You dare to snatch our duke's woman? Since you've gone crazy thinking about women, I'll tell you what the cruel reality is. Chapter 496. The people of Rotterdam were dumbfounded. They had seen fierce ones, but never this fierce. After all, apart from mages, paladins, and other mystical beings who could use extraordinary powers, the most powerful force in a country was the knights. The average knight trained for 8 to 10 years before finishing his apprenticeship. Their combat power was not to be underestimated. Normally, a fully armed knight on a horse could take care of 10 ordinary soldiers and 100 peasant soldiers. 100 knights went up and easily beat the people of the Paven family into dead dogs. In fact, there were only 40 people who attacked directly. The rest were divided into teams of 15, guarding the 4 sides. Any Rotterdam people who dared to come near would be beaten up. They would not stop until the other party was beaten to the ground. If this was Turinas's army camp, or the army camp of a lord like Mograine, it would be impossible for him to survive. Perhaps the Rotterdam people had already fought back. Unfortunately, this was a noble barracks. They came from different families, and they were competitors. After discovering that the Stormwind people were only targeting the Paven family, a group of nobles also joined in the fun and reported to their superiors. Duke Charmas was the trusted aide of King Turinas, and he knew about this test. Almost as soon as he received the news, his stomach hurt. In fact, after completing the defense of Rotterdam, when Turinas realized that Rotterdam had a chance to take over Alterac, they suddenly realized that they had acted a little too late. This was no longer a simple matter between Rotterdam and Alterac. It involved Stormwind. Now that the threat of the Horde had not been eliminated, Rotterdam could not fall out with Stormwind, one of the main forces of the alliance. Therefore, this was just a test. Whether it succeeded or failed, Rotterdam would not do anything further to avoid provoking the other kingdoms. It would be good if the Berev family was obedient. If the Berev family was not willing, then there would be plenty of time to deal with them after the war. However, by then, Rotterdam's appearance might be more ugly. Charmas did not expect the reaction from Stormwind to be so intense. He immediately rushed to the nearby camp to find Mograine. The people of Stormwind came to the camp of the 5th Legion of Rotterdam to cause trouble. There were nearly 100 knights. The gendarmerie could not handle it. Mograine had just received a magic message. He had been appointed as the Alliance's vice-commander. Who would have known that someone would cause trouble right after the promotion order was issued? If this wasn't a slap in the face, what was? Originally, he was the supreme commander of this place. Now that something had happened, he naturally could not shirk the responsibility. Mograine was a pure soldier. Without another word, he ran out of the tent and called for his 3,000 elite soldiers. They rushed to the scene of the incident aggressively. Not long after he left the camp, he realized that something was wrong. The moment he stepped out of the camp, a bugle horn sounded from another camp not far away. When he was halfway there, he discovered that the Stormwind army had already rushed out of the camp like a tide. The corners of Mograine's eyes twitched as he stared at Charmas beside him. He cursed in his heart, "Charmas, you bastard, you tricked me." It had been proven time and time again that the nobles' private armies were rarely capable of fighting. The number of ranked private armies in the entire alliance could be counted on one hand. The person standing in front of him was one of them. It was Duke Duque of Stormwind's private army. Before Kuel Salas had joined the alliance, Stormwind had given half of the Griffin Legion to Duque. Not only was this private army overstaffed, they had fought from the Elven Forest all the way to Kuel Salas. They had fought dozens of battles, large and small. They could be said to be elites who had fought from the south to the north. Their bravery was no less than Noxus's 1st Legion of Stormwind. Mograine's teeth hurt the moment he saw this army blocking his way. "General Windsor. What are you doing?" Windsor was a righteous man, but Makarov beside him was not. As Duque's mouthpiece and the first confidant to follow Duque, he was not only loyal, but had also learned many of Duque's evil tricks. Makarov rode out and shouted, "I'm sorry, General Mograine. Our Stormwind Kingdom's Countess Alucia Barev was humiliated by your kingdom's Baron Bas Pavan. Baron Pavan attempted to marry Countess Barev with a betrothal gift of 1,000 gold coins. Duke Marcus's knight captain, Cassar Ulysses, could not tolerate such humiliation and went to duel with Baron Pavan. This time, Charmas was also anxious. If Mograine's elites arrived quickly and captured Duque's knights, even if King Lang came later to ask for them, at least King Tarina's would not lose face. But now, the other side seemed to have predicted it and did not hesitate to send a large force to stop Mograine. Then, Charmas could not imagine how angry King Tarina's would be when he returned. Charmas did not care about his demeanor and directly cursed, "Duel. Bullshit. We received reports that your knights beat up our nobles. This is a great humiliation to the glory of the Kingdom of Lordaeron." At this time, Windsor stepped forward. "We belong to the same alliance now, don't let other countries see us as a joke. Why don't we retreat first, then each take 100 people in to see the situation, and then discuss?" Mograine stared at Charmas. "Okay." The army retreated, and when Mograine brought his men into the camp, he was instantly stunned. The surroundings were a mess. In order to avoid being affected, more than 4,000 noble private soldiers were like rabbits being chased into a corner, almost squeezing against the camp wall and shivering. The camp gate was demolished. The demolition method was simple and violent, which could be seen from the fact that the camp gate was dragged more than 30 meters away. Then everything between the camp gate and the Pavan family's camp was flattened. From tents to ordnance, from campfires to camp beds. Mograine's eyelids twitched as he walked. It was one thing for the Stormwind wolves to be troublesome, but their combat strength was also very strong. Finally, Mograine saw Baron Pavan, who was beaten to the point of death and did not look like a human. If it were not for the fact that the guy was covered in mud and could still vaguely recognize the badge and robe, Mograine would never be sure that this guy was always as arrogant as a swan. Charmas was angry. "Duel? Is this still a holy duel? You call yourselves knights, and you even threw away the glory of the knights. This is blasphemy. This is the greatest humiliation to the great kingdom of Lordaeron. I want to report this to the leader of the Menethil Alliance. I want Stormwind to publicly apologize. His sharp voice echoed in the silent camp. Elusia, who was following closely behind Windsor, was stunned. At this time, Makarov came out, leisurely took a drag on his cigarette, and then said slowly, "I think Knight Ulysses just threw his gloves to Baron Paven." With that, Makarov raised an iron glove that weighed a full 2 pounds. Chapter 497. You call this a fucking glove? Even a lighter rapier is not as heavy as this thing. A glove is a glove, and a gauntlet is still a gauntlet. Look at you, it's actually a one-piece, with alloy plates attached to the places where the fingers can move. It stands to reason that this is definitely a gauntlet, but because it contains fabric, it's not impossible to call it a glove. Anyway, seeing Cassar's glove, Duke Charmas almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He trembled and scolded angrily, "You're quibbling. First, a glove is not like this. Second, how do you explain Baron Paven's face full of scars? Cassar has really been led astray by Duque. As the captain of Duque's knights, from the moment he took the oath, his future was tied to Duque's. He strictly remembered Duque's instructions before he left, and activated his acting mode that barely reached the Oscar level. First, I swear in the name of my master, Duke Marcus, that this is definitely a glove. Second, I just threw the glove on Baron Paven's face. Here, just like this. In front of Duke Charmas, in front of Mograine, the newly promoted deputy commander of the Alliance, and in front of Elusia, the biggest victim of the incident, the bastard Cassar once again threw the gauntlet that he had taken off a long time ago onto the face of the Baron who had already fainted. Pa! There was a loud sound, and the scene was painful. What was the difference between this and being hit in the face with half a brick? Baron Bas Paven walked further and further down the road of unrecognizable disfigurement. Bastard, Duke Charmas scolded. You. Mograine could not continue even half a word. Ah. Elusia covered her mouth in surprise, looking at the legendary tragic object that could become her man. Cassar, who was obviously a handsome man, continued to play dumb, but Baron Paven ignored my request for a duel. Is he still a man? As a noble. I am a baron, and he is a baron. How could he refuse me so cowardly? How dare such a despicable, cowardly, good-for-nothing man call himself a noble of Rotterdam? After saying that, Cassar picked up the gauntlet that weighed 2 kilograms and threw it at the unconscious Bas Paven in front of Charmas and Mograine. That's why He challenged Baron Paven to a duel again and again. Pooh! The people of Stormwind were not the only ones who burst into laughter. Even the people of the Rotterdam kingdom could not help but burst out laughing. Aren't you a little too fake? Asking for a duel again and again? Are you sure you're not venting your anger? The originally smart, capable, and handsome knight captain now wore a retarded expression as he recited the lines left by Duque and beat up the bastard baron in front of everyone. There was no need to mention how much the Tempest man had vented his anger. Still covering her mouth, Elusia's eyes were already blurred by tears. She knew. She knew that everything was left behind by Duque. Without Duque's instructions, Cassar, who had always been strict with the spirit of chivalry, would never do such a thing. Makarov would never bring people out to cause trouble. There was no way Windsor would mobilize his 10,000 private soldiers to confront Mograine, the most famous general in the Alliance. Even if Duque was temporarily absent, Duque still took care of her and the Barev family behind her. Last year, when Duque came to the Barev family for food, he promised that if the Barev family was in trouble, he would protect them. Today, the attitude of Stormwind was unknown, but it was clear that Duque was fulfilling his promise. There were many men who were willing to make promises, but there were very few who were willing to take huge risks and still fulfill their promises. If the condition of going against the most powerful human kingdom in the world was added to the condition, it would be even less than 1 in a million. But Duque did it. Originally, Elusia was already in despair. King Eden courted death and destroyed the entire kingdom. Without a kingdom, all the nobles were like castles on the beach. They looked magnificent, but when the waves came, they would collapse. Two disappointing younger brothers first betrayed the alliance and then disappeared. Who knew how the Barav family would be dealt with after the war? Think about it, even General Haas, who did not participate in the rebellion, led his soldiers to become cannon fodder. The once incomparably noble Barav family was now just an empty shell, mercilessly squeezed out of money and resources. In the past, those who dared to propose were either dukes or at least the first in line to the Grand Duke's throne. Now, a Lordaeron baron dared to come and defecate with his nose in the air, as if marrying him was beneath him. Her best friend in Lordaeron secretly wrote a letter to her, asking her to accept this humiliating marriage. Give up. You are no longer that high and mighty Grand Duke's daughter. Alterac has not yet fallen, but it's not far from it. A fallen king will not have a good ending, and a fallen noble will not have a good ending either. In history, many men who participated in the rebellion were hanged, and many daughters who were implicated became the victor's playthings, dying with hatred. To be honest, on the day of Alterac's incident, Elusia had a premonition that this would happen. However, at that time, Duque was there to support her heart, opening his broad chest to become her, and even the entire Barav family's safe harbor. Even if her parents did not think that Duque would protect them until the end, she was still willing to believe in Duque's promise. The day Duque was exposed to the curse of death in Lordaeron was the fuse that nearly caused Elusia's heart to collapse. From that day onwards, Elusia had truly given up hope. However, at this moment, she was shocked to find that her daily prayers seemed to have been answered by the gods. Yes. Duque was still magical. He was still the creator of miracles. Even if he was not here for the time being, he was still firmly in control of the situation. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? I was so stupid. I should have believed in him until the very end. Even if everyone thought that Duque would die from the curse, I should not have given up this hope. Elusia suddenly raised her head. Everyone could see her teary eyes, and everyone could see the renewed determination in her eyes. She smiled. Smiled brightly. Then Casa smiled, Makarov smiled, and even the righteous Reginald Windsor smiled. Not only them, but everyone in Stormwind smiled knowingly. Yes. Duque might really die. Duque's will would be passed on, even if there were only them left on this path. But if anyone wants to bully our people, have they asked for our permission? Have they asked if our fists are fierce? Have they asked if our swords are sharp? If anyone is shameless, we will slap their face. If anyone dares to stretch out their claws, we will cut off their claws. Duque, you are with us. We are with you. Chapter 498. Originally, when Tyrrhenas arrived, he wanted to drag out Baron Paven, who had been beaten beyond recognition, and ask for an explanation from Lang. To be honest, it was indeed an insult to marry a duke's daughter with a dowry of 1,000 gold coins, but the great Rotterdam kingdom could not take it lying down. Tyrrhenas did not ask for the Stormwind to hand over the culprit. He was just trying to put some pressure on Stormwind, at least so that Stormwind would not interfere when Rotterdam kingdom annexed Alterac in the future. At this time, everyone could guess what happened. Including Lothar, all the Storm Royal Knights at the scene threw their gauntlets at Baron Paven with all their might. Baron Paven. I want to duel with you. Everyone shouted loudly, scaring the old Tyrrhenas half to death. Baron Paven, who had been pulled out to be used as a spear, was knocked unconscious again on the spot. Well, it was a miracle that he did not die after being smashed by these violent, muscular men. Tyrrhenas finally realized the Storm Royal Knight's unyielding attitude. Even Lothar was strongly against it, so there was no room for discussion. If the commander of the alliance resigned because of such a ridiculous matter, then Rotterdam would be the real sinner. Baron was almost the smallest noble, below them was the knight, who was more symbolic than substantive. Knights were considered quasi-nobles, higher than commoners, but lower than nobles. So, for this day, Duque made almost all the nobles nobles. Originally, he had pushed this guy out to test the waters. In the end, of course, this matter was left unsettled. However, in the upcoming war, there would definitely be some friction between Rotterdam and Storm Royal. In fact, all the other kingdoms had begun to be wary of Rotterdam. When the news was sent to Duque through magic, Duque was at the edge of the cliff of grim battle, and stopped at the entrance of the cave. It was not because the cave could not lead to the Red Dragon Queen, but because the power of the wind told him that there were more than 3 young red dragons resting in the middle of the road. Unless the dragons were in hibernation, ordinary humans would not be able to hide from their senses. Stealth was useless. Since he couldn't enter, he could only stay where he was. When the message arrived, the system notified Duque almost immediately. Warning. Warning. Magic communication encryption level lowered. Suspect communication is being eavesdropped. Duque's pupils suddenly shrank. His worst fears had come true, a magic transmission leak. Needless to say, it must be the doing of the Black Dragon King hiding in the dark. At the end of the day, magic communication was still a type of magic. In this world, the true ancestors of magic were the dragons. The Blue Dragon King, Maligos, was responsible for guarding the secrets of magic, but that was only for outsiders. In fact, all true dragons were good at magic. Needless to say, Nesario, who was originally one of the 5 dragon aspects. This was the most important reason why Duque refused to communicate with them at all times. Wings of Death didn't isolate Duque's external communications. He was only eavesdropping. Duque could still receive the complete message. However, this message still made Duque tremble. Lordaeron appointed Mograine as the deputy commander of the alliance and sought Alterac. They tried to send a noble to marry Miss Berev with a dowry of 1,000 gold coins, but they have been stopped by us and Commander Lothar. Duque's body suddenly trembled a little. Was it excitement? Anger? Or sadness? His heart thumping violently, Duque wanted to take a deep breath so that Nesario wouldn't notice his intense emotions, but he couldn't suppress it. Lordaeron, like in history, had made a move on Alterac. Perhaps because the tribes in this life were more aggressive, Lordaeron suffered more losses than in history. So under the impulse of rapid expansion, Tyrrhena's made a move earlier than in history. In history, the biggest symbol of the change from Lordaeron Alliance to Alliance was the destruction of Lordaeron. When Arthas came to the center and directly killed his father and destroyed Lordaeron, the surrounding countries had the chance to save the other cities of Lordaeron, but they all chose to watch from the sidelines, which gave Arthas the opportunity to destroy them one by one. Why? Could it be that the kings of Kuel Salus, Gilnas, Dalagen, and Stormguard were all blind? No. That's not it. That was because all the surrounding countries were kings screwed over by Tyrrhena's. In the original history, after winning the second battle of the Dark Portal, the Alliance captured more than 100,000 orcs. The orcs were clearly invaders, slaughtering countless humans and burning countless cities. After winning the war, Tyrrhena's actually made a seemingly brainless suggestion. A real knight will not slaughter captives. So we can just imprison the orcs. Was Tyrrhena's really brainless? No. On the contrary, he was extremely shrewd. Shrewd to the point of being ruthless. On one hand, the mainstream values of chivalry at that time did not allow for this. On the other hand, Tyrrhena's dream of Lordaeron becoming the new capital of the human empire through the Battle of the Dark Portal was shattered. No country was willing to follow Lordaeron. Since everyone had to bear the losses and destruction brought about by the war. If I am not living well, then don't even think about living well. Apart from the Stormwind Kingdom, which had 1,000 things to do, almost every human kingdom was forced to imprison orcs. The famous Durnhold Castle, Lordaeron Mill Shelter, and Hammerfall Town were all orc prisons that Lordaeron, as the leader of the alliance, forced the various countries to build. The economies of the various countries were already on the brink of collapse because of the war, and they were forced to carry this huge burden by Tyrrhena's, who pretended to be a saint. It would be strange if they were angry. The truth was, after hearing that Lordaeron had fallen, the leaders of the various countries clapped their hands in joy. In the end, They all ignored the fact that the Scourge army was made up of immortals, and were overwhelmed by the immortals who had the absolute advantage in numbers. So, when Duque heard that the old bastard Tarinas had finally made his move, Duque still felt a sense of anger. Is this the result I wanted? In order to preserve the vitality of the alliance, I lived every day seriously after I transmigrated. Even after obtaining millions of dollars, I did not waste a single day. I spent all my time improving myself and the strength of the entire alliance. I did not skimp on every major event. Every day, I repeatedly thought about how I could change the course of history. Because I thought that even if I could not win every battle beautifully, at least I could bring more hope to the alliance. But, Tai Roy. Nah. See. How the hell did you treat me? Chapter 499. I'm working hard for the alliance, coordinating with so many kingdoms day and night. I'm in charge of war, logistics, diplomacy, and coordination. Your hometown, Lordaeron, was almost raided, and I had to bring people to save you. Now, they had finally turned from defense to offense, and there was a glimmer of hope for victory. I'm not dead yet. You're already targeting my people? Tarina's Menethil. I'll F***ck your 18 generations of ancestors, and then F***ck your 18 generations of descendants. Duque gritted his teeth, his chest rising and falling rapidly. His arms trembled from the excessive force, and his nails dug deep into his palms. There was a famous saying in World of Warcraft, don't be afraid of a godlike boss, but be afraid of a pig-like teammate. But there was another kind of person who was even more disgusting than a pig-like teammate, traitor. Yes. In Duke's eyes, Tarina's was a ruthless man. Traitor. The Virgin Mary in disguise. Duque could not stop Aiden Piraeus from seeking death. But he had already expressed his desire to protect the Barev family. Now, before Duque had even received the news that he was dead, Tarina's had already regarded Duque as a dead man, and began to seize power to pave the way for the rise of Lordaeron. Duque really wanted to open a portal and go back. He said to Tarina's, "Ah. The sun is so bright tonight." What? You're asking me why there's sun at night? It's simple. Because Tarina's, you son of a bitch, are blind. You can't see the situation, and you can't see the future, yet you're sitting in the highest position. You trash. Your heart is as black as the darkest night. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Duque suddenly ran out of the cave and laughed wildly on the mountainside. His laughter was carried far away by the strong wind. At first, Duke was still thinking that he should stop Tarina's precious son, Arthas, from killing his own father since he was familiar with history. For some inexplicable reason, Duque was suddenly filled with a strong desire to see Arthas commit patricide. That old bastard's shocked and terrified expression must be great. Hoo. Looks like you really want me dead. But, I won't. Duque's eyes suddenly became firm and determined. His fierce gaze was as sharp as a sword. Like raging waves. However, just as Duque's thoughts were in a mess, he suddenly received a new message from Krasis. Sorry, all of them failed. Duque was certain that Krasis, who was the most talented in magic among the dragons, had sensed Deathwing's eavesdropping. That was why he sent such a baffling magical message that only Duque could understand. Duque was suddenly horrified. What the hell was going on? Wasn't it Krasis who convinced the other 3 dragon aspects in history? How did they all fail? What the hell? I got the most important talisman, Deathwing, and now you're telling me that the 3 most important helpers are not coming? Then why the hell am I still fighting? At this moment, Duque had the urge to cry. That's right, a man does not easily shed tears. But now he felt so bad that he wanted to cry. Is this the so-called despair? No. Definitely not. I, Duque, am the man who will become an archmage in Azeroth. If that useless Krasis can't handle the 3 dragon aspects, then I'll go there myself. Although it was a trip, Duque did not have the time to go to another continent to find Blue Dragon King Maligos, nor did he have the time to go to the Cavern of Time in the desert to find Nozdormu. Duque's only chance was the Green Dragon Queen Isra, who was hiding in the Emerald Dream. Isra, the Emerald Dream she guarded, was the reflection of Azeroth in the dream. Everything that happened in the Emerald Dream and in reality would affect each other. In theory, it was easy to find Isra, as long as you dreamed and then contacted her in the dream. In practice, it was impossible to attract Isra's attention unless it was an extraordinary dream constructed with extremely strong mental power. Duque hid back in the cave, in a concave not far from the cave entrance. He sealed his body with ice to ensure that the changes in his breath would not be noticed by Deathwing. After instructing the system elf to maintain the monitoring of the Deathwing talisman, Duque took out a bottle of potion from the storage space. It was a black bottle. After pasting a special label on it and placing it in the designated place, he quickly found it. This thing was called Death Dream. Even in Karazhan's laboratory, it was regarded as a taboo by Medivh, and it was the most strictly guarded and labeled as the most dangerous. Just 3 drops of this venom on the tip of the arrow killed Manta, the king of the abyss. Just 3 drops were enough to kill an existence that was 10 times the size and strength of a giant dragon. Just like Deathwing, almost everyone once thought that Manta was absolutely invincible. Now, Duque was going to take some Death Dream. He wanted to use the strongest hallucinogenic effect of this thing. The deepest sleep, the deepest dream. Duque said to himself as he opened the bottle, if I can do it, then Isra should be there. No, she must be there. But if there's too much, then I'll be the one to die. Most people only have one chance, but am I an ordinary person? Duque laughed at himself. Yes. Duque was not afraid of death. But he was afraid of decay or destruction at the soul level. The curse that Sargeras used before he knelt down was of this level. Compared to the slow countdown of death like a frog being boiled in warm water, Duque was more willing to take a gamble. How many gambles were there in life? He took out a cup and a small bottle of pure water from his storage space. Then he poured just enough water into the cup and opened the black bottle. He carefully lifted the opened black bottle to the top of the glass. 3 drops of poison killed Manta in a few seconds. How many drops did Duque need? The deepest slumber and eternal death. The difference between the two was much smaller than most people could imagine. Duque tilted his hand and poured out the smallest drop of poison he could. He watched the drop of poison fall silently into the cup of water. Duque closed the lid of the small bottle and picked up the cup. Damn, it would be great if there was a comfortable spring bed at this time. Duque added, well, it would be better if there were 2 elven girls with big breasts to accompany me on my left and right. Duque smiled and said to himself, come on. Drink this cup of dichlorvos. After saying that, he drank it in one gulp. Chapter 500. The gale howled in the pale sky, and countless misty grayish-white drifted erratically in front of the towering grim battle fortress. The grayish-white that symbolized death filled every corner of his field of vision. It was like watching an old black and white movie. A familiar yet unfamiliar chill ran through his body. Duque shuddered and suddenly realized that this scene was really King familiar. He looked down at his translucent hands, and then at the translucent woman with white wings in front of him. Duque suddenly realized. F***CK. I'm dying. F***CK, how long has it been? I've almost forgotten this feeling. How long has it been since the last time I died and ran my corpse? The only good thing was that the system was still there. The system notification said, you're dead. Do you want to activate instant corpse resurrection? If yes, please pay additional soul power. Yes/no? Duque decisively clicked yes. Duque had no choice at all. The despicable black dragon was staring at him now. If he really found out and took back the black dragon amulet, he would really have no place to cry. In fact, Deathwing really did find out. He felt that the faint soul connection between himself and Duque was temporarily interrupted. Nesario, who had transformed into his human form and was hiding at the foot of the mountain, frowned. However, in the next moment, he found that the soul connection was restored. There was no mistake. Could it be that I'm too close to the demon's soul, causing problems with my perception? After thinking about it, the demon's soul refused to be touched by any dragon. In order to prevent him from interfering again, the seal that the four bastards put on was quite terrifying. He was not afraid of going up against the four guys who did not have full strength, but he was afraid of encountering the demon's soul. The backlash of the demon's soul on the entire dragon race was no laughing matter. On the other side, in the ice, Duque panted heavily. Looking at the black dragon amulet in his hand, Duque was speechless for a long time. F***ck, it's too much, and I died. Duque smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for the soul force that Medivh had left for him, he would have turned to dust after enduring for 14 days. All right. I'll take a smaller portion this time. Duque used half of the amount from last time and drank it with water. This time, it wasn't the fairy sister whose vision went dark and she directly saw the grave. Instead, it was a faintly discernible murmur that sounded like the wind, but also like some kind of love action movie. Duke felt unwell. Because he recognized that this was Aurelia's purposely suppressed moaning when he stabbed her in the back. The scene in front of him instantly changed. Duque was dreaming, and it was the most intense kind. Aurelia was not a gentle woman. She was independent, strong-willed, determined, and courageous. Especially now that they were facing a great enemy, Aurelia was even more focused on taking revenge on the tribe. She couldn't understand how hot-blooded a young human male with the body of a little over 16 years old could be. It couldn't be helped. Even if humans and elves had similar styles, there were still differences between them. In fact, after that night, she didn't have much time with Duque. Plus, Duque was a transmigrator who had graduated from an engineering university. Engineering. It was good enough to see a female. That was the grave of a male. That was the place where Saos competed with Diaochan. As a result, Duque had actually accumulated a lot of pressure. There were a few times when Duque almost couldn't take it anymore. For a moment, he wanted to make a move on the cabbages beside him, like Vanessa or Alicia. As a result, Duque's willpower in this area was actually quite weak. As a result, under the intense power of the hallucination, Duque made a fool of himself. In the dream, he became the male protagonist of a love movie. His opponents were the beauties he had met after he transmigrated. If he was the only one talking in his sleep, then it would be fine. But the bad thing was that 3 kilometers away from him, the third sister of the Windrunner family was eavesdropping. The group hid in a secluded valley, waiting for news from Sasha. How is it? Is there any movement from the boss? Gavin Rad asked nervously. Sasha's face was red, which was rare. What was she supposed to say? Was she supposed to tell these animals the truth and what their boss was dreaming about? What embarrassed Sasha the most was that not only did Duque call out Aurelia's name, he even said, "Queen Sylvie, come with the Sasha sisters." These words angered Sasha so much that she trembled. Duke, that bastard, was actually dreaming. Sasha gritted her teeth and stopped eavesdropping. She was afraid that if she kept eavesdropping, she would really go crazy. Ronan asked, "What's wrong with Lord Marcus?" Sasha scolded, "I don't care if he dies." The other 3 in the team were all dumbfounded when they heard this. Duque had courted death, and then he had failed. Several times in a row, he had either given too much or too little. Finally, on the 13th time, Duque suddenly had a vague feeling that he was right this time. His consciousness became blurry again. He seemed to feel the arrival of the goddess of fate. In the confused sound of the wind, he seemed to hear the voice of fate. "You are sliding faster and faster towards your final rest, brave Duque. Before that, is there anything else you want me to do for you? Are you going to save Alexstrasza?" Duque's lips moved slightly. "No, I don't just want to save her. Since I, Duque, have come to Azeroth, I hope to make this world a better place." The murmur of fate continued. Don't you want something for yourself? Maybe you want your fading life back? Or to rule over a region? Or perhaps, eternal life? Everyone has to die. I have no intention of changing this fate. But if I have any hope, it would be to transmigrate here. At least I don't want to leave any regrets, right? Regrets? Yes, I really have too many regrets towards this world. For a moment, fate seemed to feel the regret in Duque's heart, and it also felt the selfishness hidden in the bottom of Duque's heart. Fate seemed to let out a light laugh. Then there was darkness. The darkness seemed to be pulling him in. Duque began to feel that it was difficult to breathe, and it was difficult to think. He even wanted to turn around and just disappear in the comfortable darkness. This idea was becoming more and more tempting to him. But he forced himself to be more clear-headed. Yes. Duque's clear voice surged in the long river of fate. You want to make me sink into darkness? What a joke. If I am destined to be pulled into the dark hell, then I would rather transform myself into light and turn hell into a bright heaven. If the end of a hero is destined to be a tragedy, then I will rewrite all the scripts. My life. My script. My world. Only I can write all of them. Chapter 501. Was it a cry? A roar? A roar at the end of his road? Or the voice of despair? Duque couldn't tell. He didn't want to tell. He wanted to vent. He wanted to change everything. Was a deviation of 21% enough? If it wasn't enough, I'll help you increase it to 100%, 200%. 1000%. Today, I'll help you increase Nesario to Baldi, and tomorrow to Elated. F***CK. I don't believe it. Is power really everything? Is fate really unshakable? No. Never. Everyone has the right to dream. I've sacrificed so much. I've changed this world so much. Why am I not qualified to break fate and turn dreams into reality? In a domain that Duque couldn't see, with his soul as the center, a wave of strange ripples spread out. In the calm spiritual world, a gust of wind began to stir. It set off monstrous waves, and it stirred up every dream. Many images came rushing at him, but they weren't his dreams. They were other people's dreams. At this moment, Duque saw humans, elves, dwarves, and even orcs and goblins, as well as their wishes and requests. He endured the pain of their nightmares and tasted their sweet feelings. If Duque's previous memories could produce dreams with a capacity of 10 terabytes, then the dreams he was stirring now had a capacity of billions, trillions. There were clearly countless dreamscapes, but Duque's dream of destiny stood out from the countless dreamscapes, struggling to move forward, leaving all the other dreamscapes behind. Ah! This was a cry that transcended the mortal world. Ah! This was a cry that shook the dream world. Ah! This was a roar that shook the river of fate. Every time this voice seemed to reach its peak and could no longer go higher, it was as if a higher mountain would appear for it to surpass, for it to step on as proof that it had surpassed it. Countless dreams began to resonate with Duque's dream, emitting the strongest sound that could spread throughout the entire dream world. Suddenly, Duque felt himself being pulled up and pulled to a place full of light and color. Almost at the same time, his heavy breathing became smoother, and his frozen and sluggish thoughts became smoother. He didn't open his eyes, but he felt like he was immersed in a green, dazed world. In the flowing green space, another illusion appeared. Unlike the other chaotic images around it, it maintained its shape and continued to grow, completely overshadowing the tiny figure in the mage robe. That's right. Compared to the existence in front of him, Duque was incomparably small. An elegant giant dragon appeared. It seemed both real and illusory. She stretched out her wings as if she had just woken up. Her body was cloaked in the pale green of the forest at dusk. Duque raised his head, thinking that he would meet her eyes, but he found that her eyes seemed to be asleep. However, he did not doubt that the Lady of Dreams could sense his presence. The corners of the green dragon's mouth curled up slightly, showing an extremely gentle curve for a dragon. You didn't hesitate to dream of death, just to see me? It seems like you want to sacrifice yourself to change your fate. Fate is not as easy to change as you think. Besides, I won't let you make such a sacrifice, Duke Marcus. From the day you descended into this world and entered my domain, you have always been the person in my dream that I am most interested in. The most charming person in my dream, as a legendary dragon aspect who had guarded the Emerald Dream for countless years. What kind of dream had Isra not seen? Monotonous dreams, shallow dreams, which made Isra feel bored. She didn't want exciting dreams, but at least something fresh was good. Duke's dream entered Isra's vision by chance. That was only at the level of attention, far from the level of her appearance. However, today was different. The dream that was strong enough to change millions of people and tens of millions of living beings deeply attracted her, which was why she appeared. Seeing Isra's arrival, Duke seemed to instinctively want to stand on the ground, or rather, find a place to stand. However, from the beginning, the ground around Duke wasn't real. It felt like he was stepping on a rice cake that hadn't formed yet. He couldn't exert any force, and it was easy to deform. However, Duke wasn't an ignorant bumpkin. He almost subconsciously thought of the astronauts. This was the Emerald Dream, a place formed by dreams. If that was the case, Duke was dreaming in front of Isra, or rather, imagining it. A gentle wind blew in the Emerald Dream, and Isra's huge eyelids seemed to move. She looked at Duke with interest, but didn't stop Duke's actions. Isra was immediately surprised. She saw Duke solidify under Duke's powerful spiritual will in this liquid-like thing that she called the source of dreams. It formed a chair that looked like wind, but was actually solid. Duke sat on it and adjusted himself so that he was parallel to her line of sight, facing her huge dragon head, less than 10 meters away. Duke apologized straightforwardly. Sorry, I didn't mean to invade your territory, but not being able to touch the ground makes me feel guilty. It's okay, Duke. Thank you, Isra. Why did you suddenly come today? The expression on the green dragon's face should be a smile. But Duke sighed. He didn't have time to beat around the bush with Isra. For the Emerald Dream that mortals couldn't even imagine, the biggest characteristic of dreams was that they were unpredictable. As the master and guardian of this world, Isra also inherited almost the same characteristic. Beating around the bush with her, she could talk to you for 100 years without repeating it. You're so elegant, so polite, and you don't even put on the airs of a dragon in front of a mere mortal like me. Why do you pretend you didn't see all this? Why did you repeatedly reject the pleas of a great red dragon when Crassus, or Cleostras, found you? Oh, Cleostras. Looks like you know a lot, Duke. Isra didn't deny it. Knowledge and history exist in books. Duke pointed at his head. Okay, can you answer my question? Isra's huge figure seemed to float backwards. The green dragon in her vision became erratic, and some illusory ripples appeared on her body. It was as if she and Duke, one under the water and the other on the surface. When a drop of water fell into the quiet pond, the ripples blocked their vision. Her eyes were closed, but her face never left the intruder of the dream. Chapter 502. Why turn a blind eye? It's not that simple to save Alexstrasza. And I can feel Nesario lurking near her. If I force myself to fight Nesario, the price I might have to pay. Even I don't know if it's worth it. If even I fall, that will be the day the Emerald Dream collapses. Duke was about to say something, but he suddenly found that he could not speak. Yes, this was Isra's territory. She was the absolute master here. Even in the distant past, we dragon aspects were only given the responsibility of protecting this world. Isra sighed. Duque found that he could speak. Are you trying to say that humans, elves, and dwarves are not within your protection? Isra did not reply directly. Isn't it better to let this world run its own course? If Alexstrasza is destined to be rescued, then what is predestined will naturally happen, right? Her indifference, and the indifference of the three dragon aspects, made Duque extremely unhappy. Duque raised his head proudly. Although I'm sorry, I have to say that you're wrong. Fate has its own trajectory, but it will never remain the same. There is no predestined death, nor is there a predestined failure. If every existence were to hide and dream like you when faced with a choice, that would be a natural failure. Isra was silent. Or are you afraid of the wing of death, Neltharion himself? Isra retracted her wings. Don't mention him. The corners of Duque's mouth curved coldly, and he continued to interrogate. Why not? Answer me, great Isra. Is it the memories of him that give you nightmares? Or is it his own actions that cause the plague of nightmares in the world of dreams? Although her eyes were still closed, Duque knew that Isra must have some kind of fear of Deathwing in her heart. I swear, I'll never enter his dreams again. He is probably the only character who is more terrifying in his dreams than when he is awake. If Krasus heard Isra's words, the red dragon would probably be dumbfounded. But Duke knew very well why this was the case. After the ancient god Enzos used the whispers of the ancient god to drive Nesario crazy, Nesario had actually been suffering from severe schizophrenia for a long time. Reason with a lunatic? That's really hee-hee. Duque did not care about Isra's psychological trauma towards Nesario at all. He was only focused on one thing from the beginning to the end, whether he could summon the 3 ancient dragons to fight Deathwing to the death. This was not an easy task. Firstly, the demon's soul had taken away their strength. Although they wouldn't be reduced to such a state, their strength would still be reduced by 50%. Secondly, Duque could clearly see that these fellows were only willing to guard their own land after 10,000 years had passed since the era of the dragons. The Blue Dragon King, Malygos, had become mentally ill because the Blue Dragon army had been wiped out and his wife had died. The Bronze Dragon King, Nozdormu, was only willing to focus on his collection every day. He had become a shut-in. The Green Dragon Queen, Isra, was already considered easy to talk to. Duque raised his head high. You're afraid of Nesario, but you and your race still haven't given up on humans, elves, and dwarves, haven't you? Even if you're afraid, you're still looking for a way to destroy Nesario, aren't you? Isra sighed. So what? Even if I drag Nesario into the Emerald Dream, I can't destroy him. Even in my domain, there are limits. Duque's voice became clearer and louder. What you can't do doesn't mean that others and other races can't do it. In this world, humans are indeed a new race. But so what? Haven't we created enough miracles? Haven't humans realized those seemingly absurd dreams many times? Since you think you can't do it, why don't you dare to give it a try and let me rewrite your destiny for you? The Green Dragon Queen's huge body trembled. Isra, let me tell you, I've obtained a way to save Alexstrasza. Regardless of whether I can get your help or not, I will persist in fighting Deathwing with her. The only difference between whether you, Malygos, and Nozdormu join us is whether we can take this opportunity to deal a heavy blow to Deathwing. Just because you don't dare doesn't mean that the other dragon aspects don't dare. Help me contact Malygos and Nozdormu. I'll convince them. Duque knew that Isra was still a little lacking in courage, or rather, she didn't trust him enough. She silently sensed Duque's mind, or rather, the aura of the dream that only she could taste. You're not lying. Well, if you really want to do that, I'll help you call them. The Dragon of Dreams' body swayed. Duque suddenly found that Isra had changed shape. Standing in front of him was a slender, fair-skinned woman. She was beautiful, but she was as ethereal as air. She wore a silky light green gauze robe, and a veil covered the lower half of her face. To some extent, she reminded Duque of the ethereal goddess in the graveyard. Of course, they were not the same thing. Her eyes were still closed. Suddenly, Isra's eyes opened completely. Duque was stunned. It was a pair of eyes that transcended his understanding. It was full of fantasy colors, as if this pair of eyes belonged to someone he knew, someone he loved deeply. It was also as if this pair of eyes was extremely unfamiliar. It was as if at that moment, Duque lost his ability to distinguish colors, because he actually saw all kinds of colors in Isra's eyes: blue, green, red, black, gold. There was every color in her eyes. There was also a pair of eyes that seemed to be the reflection of his own eyes. With this shocking opening, Duque found that the space on both sides of him was shaking violently. On the left was the 1,000 miles of ice. In a huge ice cave that was at least a kilometer high, a huge blue dragon with dull eyes was indifferent to everything. If he roared angrily, "Isra! How many times have I said it? Don't peep into my dream." Isra would think that there was a chance. However, this dragon that was always happy now looked like an idiot. It just glanced at Isra and didn't say a word. On the right was the 1,000 miles of yellow sand. In a reddish-brown cave surrounded by golden quicksand in Tanaris, there were countless huge monsters that looked like statues. Suddenly, a sandstorm rolled up, and the yellow sand began to gather, gradually forming a recognizable shape. It was the shape of a dragon. Chapter 503. It was the size of Maligos, and it stretched its dusty brown wings lazily. The sand continued to be absorbed into the behemoth's body and seemed to be mixed with various shiny metal particles. The dragon that was gradually taking shape in front of Duque's eyes shone even more brightly under the scorching sun. "Isra." The sand dragon spat out a few puzzled words. "Why are you disturbing my afternoon nap with a human? Disturb my peace here? Give me a reason not to be angry. Not enough respect, not even a proper title." Duque ignored the blue dragon king and shouted at the time king, "Nosdormu, I know you can see the past and future of time and space. Well, since you're convinced that your time is eternal, and that Nesario will die and become one of your favorite collections, I'm not going to let you live. Then let me ask you 2 questions. First, do you see yourself falling? Second, do you see my future? Puny human, what are you saying?" The strange light in the pair of gem-like huge dragon eyes suddenly intensified. "I am the incarnation of time. I am eternity. No one can kill me." Nosdormu, who seemed to have seen through everything in the world, roared angrily. The entire sky was filled with sand and gravel. In Nosdormu's domain, every inch of land contained some kind of ancient magic. Just a grain of sand was enough to ensure that an ancient dragon had never existed. From the past to the present to the future. Not to mention a puny wizard Qinxing. If he was hit, Duque would be reduced to ashes, and even his Aurelia would completely forget about him. The ruler of time was just that terrifying. The corners of Duque's eyes twitched, but he had no intention of dodging or defending. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Time, space, and fate. These 3 forces were universally acknowledged as unsolvable in countless novels and games. Fighting against it in vain would only make the dragon laugh. That bastard bronze dragon king. The power of time is clearly flowing through his body, yet he doesn't care about what happens in the present or the future. The collection meant everything to him. He sent his servants to collect everything, just so he could live in the past, ignoring the present and the future. If he was not scolded awake, the 3 dragon kings would not make a move. Then Duque himself would be in danger. If Deathwing didn't die, even if he saved Alexstrasza, she would only be a protective talisman in the future. The dragon kings were all at the same level. Did they have 1 amulet fortress or 4 amulets? Duque could only act tough to the end. Under Isra's surprised gaze, Duque stood with his hands behind his back, allowing the wind to blow across his face. His eyes were firm, and his posture was like a pine tree in the storm, with extraordinary pride and a pitiful gaze. This made Nosdormu even angrier. At this time, Isra seemed to sigh softly. It was hard to tell if it was a sigh or just a snort. Anyway, the whole world shook a little, and then the apocalyptic sand that Nosdormu had stirred up was completely erased. Yes, if wiping the blackboard was as simple as wiping away the chalk on the blackboard. This was Isra's emerald dream, and Isra was only connected to the consciousness of the 2 dragon kings. If they wanted to kill Duque through the dream, the only possibility was that Isra allowed them to do so. In any other place, perhaps Isra would do the same, using his own method to ignore the death of a human. Even though Duque was a human hero, how many heroes had died in the past thousands of years? In the Emerald Dream, it was completely different. Isra, Nozdormu roared, changing his target. Nozdormu. Duque roared. He once again attracted the attention of the shining golden dragon. Wipe your almost blind eyes and look clearly. Have you seen my past? What surprised Isra was that Nozdormu's reaction to these seemingly ordinary words was extremely intense. You. Who are you? Why can't I see your past? You don't belong to this time. You're not human. Who are you? The golden dragon let out a cry as if it was hurt. At this moment, even Malygos, who had been in a daze, seemed to be moved. I'm here to show you the way. Otherwise, you'll be finished in less than 50 years. Duque was speaking the truth. If Duque's knowledge of history was correct, in the future, the 5 dragon kings were almost all wiped out, leaving only Alexstrasza. The death of Nozdormu, the king of time, was even more hilarious. There was a problem. How could a dragon that could manipulate time die? The answer was yes. The current Nozdormu actually died together with the future Nozdormu. There was another important reason why Duque revealed this. In principle, the bronze dragon was the guardian of time. Their duty was to protect the past from being changed, and they also had the power to travel through time. In a sense, Duque was a transmigrator from the future to the present Azeroth. Therefore, the bronze dragon was a hurdle that he had to overcome. Otherwise, who knew if he would be purified by the bronze dragon who would rush back in the future? Duque's biggest card was the death of the bronze dragon king in the future. If Nozdormu did not want to die, then Duque could use this card to threaten or reach an agreement with the bronze dragon clan. Really? Duque was gambling. If he lost, he would not have to go back to deal with Nesario. He would be wiped out by Nozdormu here. If Nozdormu tried his best, even Isra could not save him. If he won the bet, now, Duque saw Nozdormu's struggle and hesitation. For the first time, this bronze dragon king, who only knew how to eat and wait for death and did not do any proper work, discovered that his eyes, which could see the future beyond time, could not see himself 50 years in the future. The golden-yellow gravel dragon was trembling. Duque decided to add fuel to the fire. Yes. I did not belong here. But my future belongs to Azeroth. May I ask, great king of time, do you allow a variable like me to exist? Are you willing to give me, and the Bronze Dragon clan, a change and hope? Nozdormu almost instinctively spat out a ball of sand to attack the tiny Duque, but in the eyes of the other 2 dragon kings, Nozdormu was being forced to retreat. This was an extremely strange scene. Duke unleashed his final trump card. Lend me your power, Nozdormu. I am willing to point out the right path for you. As for you, Malygos, I can provide you with a little thing, in private. The Blue Dragon King, who had been muddle-headed, suddenly trembled. Chapter 504. Duque fell into a strange state of slumber. On the surface, he was waiting for the red dragon to leave, but in reality, he was still trapped in the Emerald Dream. The red dragon didn't realize this, Nesario didn't realize it, and neither did Sasha and the others who were lurking behind Duque. Almost at the same time, in a Dalajan military camp, a large group of people were busy. It was a huge stone gate. The door was made of purple crystal pillars that conformed to the Dalajan style. Of course, it wasn't as ridiculously huge as the Dark Portal, but it was still one of the best portals in the world. The illusory purplish-blue portal had yet to fully open. When the bystanders looked over, they could only see complete darkness on the other side. Almost 100 Dalajan mages were nervously inspecting every single magical array. The Earth Mage was testing his mana output. The Morning Star Wizard was checking if the structure of the magic formation was complete. A Kirin Tor Counselor and a Silver Moon Counselor were standing at a high place, commanding everything. It seems like this world hasn't had such a large-scale teleportation in almost 1,000 years, right? The Silver Moon Parliament member muttered to himself. In the square next to it, thousands of people were also busy. They were not ordinary soldiers. Almost every one of them was fully armed and had a knight insignia on the chest of their armor. At the very least, it was a knight apprentice insignia. Meanwhile, the knight servants were nervously conducting the final checks on their equipment. Weapons, equipment, and a small amount of water and rations. Behind them were a large number of professions: hunters, rogues, priests, and mages. In front of these knights, there were a few holy knights clad in bright silver armor, their bodies glowing with holy light. They had a name that resounded throughout the Alliance and the Horde: Knights of the Silver Hand. If one were to look carefully, they would notice that most of their weapons were enchanted with the Dragon Slayer spell that was specific to the dragon race. Even if half of the Dalajan mages were to gather for the teleportation, it was impossible for them to have the same teleportation ability as the Dark Portal, much less transport an army of 100,000 in one go. 1,000 people, 1,200 at most. This was already the limit. The most elite troops of the entire Rotterdam Kingdom were gathered there. Almost everyone here had the strength to take down 5 orc warriors by themselves. They were the elite of the elite. They were the pride of Lordaeron. There was a viewing platform at the back of the square. From this balcony, one could clearly see everything that was happening below. Tyrrhenas, the king of Lordaeron, stood with his head held high. He held the king's scepter in his hand and said to Antonidas, "My military advisor told me that even if we were to face 3 ancient dragons at the same time, we would not be able to defeat them. Even this team can fight against him." Antonidas seemed to be thinking about something. After a few seconds, he replied, "Your consultant gave you a rather conservative estimate." Tyrrhena's face was filled with pride. Lordaeron has failed before, but Lordaeron will rise again. Daelin, Xion, Lang, and Salas, who were standing near Tyrrhenas, frowned. They could sense that Tyrrhenas had used the word Lordaeron. Even Kale, that's and Kudrin Wildhammer, who were also spectating the ceremony, felt disgusted. Ever since the incident with Lordaeron and Stormwind a few days ago, the kings had become even more vigilant. Everyone knew that Lordaeron was not kind. After they failed to forcefully marry Alucia, the 2 countries had a war of words. When Lothar threatened to resign from his position as the commander-in-chief, Tyrrhenas finally gave in. He stripped that guy of his title and demoted him to a knight. He made the Pavan family publicly apologize, and at the same time, pushed the blame onto the messenger. They said that the betrothal gift was actually 100,000 gold coins, not 1,000. They said that the guy's math was taught by a physical education teacher. Anyway, it was a bunch of nonsense that even a child would not believe. As a result, even if Lordaeron and Stormwind did not completely fall out, the seeds of conflict had already been planted. If it was not for the fact that the Horde had occupied the entire southern continent and the Arthi Highlands, which was the bridgehead in the northern continent, perhaps the alliance would have already begun to split. Everyone knew that Lordaeron was twisted. Perhaps it was because Lordaeron had always been a twisted superpower. It was just that they had not shown it before. Now, Lordaeron refused to form an alliance on the grounds that the raid mission was not suitable for too many countries. In fact, the lineup of Lordaeron was something that all the countries might not be able to come up with even if they sold everything they had. Hence, the kings at the side were extremely conflicted. They hoped that Lordaeron's raid could break the current passive situation of the alliance being beaten up, but they also secretly hoped that Lordaeron would not succeed. After all, once they lost the last trump card, the Red Dragon, the Horde would very likely collapse. They could not imagine how arrogant Lordaeron would be after completing this important turning point of the battle. Of course, this time, if Duque was here, he would say that Lordaeron was going to poke a hornet's nest live. Tyrrhenas turned around and opened his arms to the kings. "Did you see that? The elites of Lordaeron are so strong. Did you see that? This is the heroic posture of a sure-win army." The kings saw the almost crazed expression on Tyrrhena's face. However, none of the kings said a word, except for Lang. Ryan Rin strode forward. This seemingly ordinary movement was filled with a firm, cold, and sonorous feeling. Mograine, who was standing beside Tarina's, could not help but narrow his eyes. General Menethil, I just want to tell you one thing. Never look down on those you think are just pawns. With that, Lang walked away without looking back. Chief Marshal Anjuan Lothar also left with Lang. Within the alliance, the way of addressing someone was very vague. To be more intimate, one could call him by his name, adding, Your Majesty. For example, normally, Duque preferred to call Tarina's, Your Majesty. If it was business, then he would call the other party by their military rank. At this point, all kings were generals. It was not wrong for Lang to call Tarina's that. But this way, the relationship between them was very cold. But Lionel was Lionel. Even if he was the ruler of a fallen country, he would definitely not be snubbed. He was asking for it. Lang's public flipping of the table in the political arena made Tarina's face turn sour. Then, Tarina's sneered. Don't care about him. This is a righteous battle, and we will definitely win. If you are ready, please begin, Master. Antonidas did not like Tarina's. This was the shamelessness of politics. As one of the countries that had received enough benefits, Antonidas had to fully support this operation. On the surface, this was purely Lordaeron's army. In reality, after the Dalajan received the benefits, they allowed many free mages to sign contracts and transfer to Lordaeron. Chapter 505. If the operation failed, Lordaeron would suffer a double loss, and the Dalajan would not have a good time either. Antonidas nodded, and waved to the people below. Immediately, a commotion began to spread. Everyone, get ready. Open the portal in 5 minutes. Countdown begins. In the plaza, the servants in charge of preparations began to leave like a flowing stream. Soon, the only ones left were the generals and soldiers. Unrelated people were quickly taken away. The Dalajan guards in charge of safety quickly sealed off the plaza. Groups of Morning Star mages stepped into the magic formation beside the portal, and entered their designated positions. Everyone began to look at Grand Mage Antonidas on the platform. After preparing the guards, Antonidas quickly began to cast a spell. After a short incantation, Antonidas's consciousness began to enter the hazy void. He was looking for the spatial coordinates of Grim Battle Fortress. Teleportation was never an easy task. Unless it was a capital city of a kingdom, it was difficult to have complete spatial coordinates. Most of the time, mages had to explore it themselves and lock onto a target. If they were not careful, it would be a tragedy. Hence, few mages below Radiant Moon dared to teleport to areas outside the major cities. To avoid alerting the enemy, the Alliance did not even set the coordinates with the Grimbatal mages beforehand. The person they relied on the most was naturally Breaking Dawn mage Antonidas. He did not have to spend much effort to find his target. It was to the east of Grim Battle, near the Dragon's Maw Gate in the future. He could not set the portal on top of Grim Battle Mountain. Firstly, there was not much space there, and secondly, the assault team would be very passive against the Red Dragon's repeated attacks. He also did not have the cheating skills of the Wings of Death to directly find the secret passage to the Red Dragon Queen. He could only choose the most suitable spot, an empty space between the Horde's army and Grim Battle Fortress. Found it. The moment Antonidas locked onto the coordinates, the huge portal in the plaza began to fluctuate violently. First it was a ripple, and then it turned into a huge wave made of an unknown substance. In a few moments, the scene on the other side of the portal appeared. It was a huge passageway, and both sides of the passageway were filled with torches. The tribal warrior who was in charge of guarding was shocked by the sudden appearance of the portal in front of him. Then, he saw the Alliance soldiers standing in front of the portal, ready to charge. General Abendis, the highest commander of this operation, raised his sword high. In the name of Lordaeron, charge! There was a loud roar in the square. With the most capable Silver Hand as the leader, the commandos rushed over. Leading the way, Abendis and Saidan Dathrahan charged forward like two sharp swords, and the beast men immediately fell into chaos. However, it was only a moment of confusion. To the surprise of the people of Rotterdam, the orcs seemed to be quite prepared. Hundreds of well-equipped orc warriors with considerable strength rushed out from the various branches of the main road of the fortress, and fought with the elites of the Rotterdam kingdom. The hundreds of orcs charged back at the 1,000 elites of the Rotterdam kingdom, and it seemed that they still had a chance of winning. A few orc centurions tried their best to encourage their tribesmen, hoping to use the relatively narrow terrain to contain the alliance's offensive and turn the tide of the battle. However, he soon realized that his thoughts were just wishful thinking. In front of him were two of the most ferocious people in the alliance. Moreover, even though the warriors here were also known as elites, and also had a good reputation for bravery in the clan. Unfortunately, even though they had the same title, there was still a fundamental difference in combat power between warriors of different clans. Many factors such as physique and resistance determined combat power. If the combat power of the elites of the Black Rock clan under the direct jurisdiction of Orgrim was 100, these guys would at most be 70. In front of the elites of the Rotterdam kingdom, that was not enough at all. The strength that they were proud of was useless in the face of faster speed. Often, when the orcs swung their arms, a sharp sword had already pierced through their terrible faces. This was especially so for the paladins of the Silver Hand who were charging at the front. Killing orcs of this level was no different from chopping melons and vegetables. Saidan was holding a sledgehammer that shone with holy light, just like the legendary titan who controlled the supreme divine power. As long as he swung the sledgehammer, several rays of holy light would sweep into the crowd of orcs like lightning. The platinum holy light hammer emitted a holy aura, and easily hit the orcs that weighed hundreds of kilograms like flying balls. With the enhancement of the paladin's skill, dedication, Saidan would have a large amount of holy light penetrating the ground with every step he took, and then bursting out from the ground. As long as any orc was slightly weaker, their legs would immediately be burned by the holy light, and they would be charred directly. However, that was not the end. General Abendus, who was beside him, also became more and more courageous as he fought. In the end, he seemed to have entered a state similar to being possessed by the god of war. His red armor that looked like it was burning like flames was emitting some kind of light that was similar to holy light during his intense movements. That was already some kind of materialization of the special energy of the warrior profession, fury. The great sword in his hands actually surged with red power, and his majesty was like the arrival of Odin, the titan of creation. The roar that came out of his mouth was like thunder, and he did not even need to draw his sword. Just the power of fury alone was enough to unleash the special warrior skill, Thunderous Strike, and directly kill the heavily injured orcs. The soldiers of the assault team were so ferocious that the kings who were watching the battle from behind stared dumbfoundedly at all of this. They felt like they were in a trance, as if just relying on the elites of the elites, they could wipe out all the tribes. Terenaz's face had an unspoken arrogance that did not need to be expressed. His gray hair fluttered in the wind, and he had an indescribable air about him. Antonidas was silent. He watched as the assault team began to split into two groups. One group built a line of defense, using junk as cover, and began to seal the largest entrance of the fortress. The assault team, on the other hand, went all the way to the deepest part of the fortress. It seemed like there was hope. At this time, Antonidas's senses spread out in the fortress. He wanted to see if he could help the troops predict danger, such as which direction the red dragon was in. At this moment, he suddenly sensed a strange existence. To be precise, he sensed the aura of a magic circuit. He swore that he would never forget this presence for the rest of his life, because it came from the same source. It was the presence of Arcane Throne and Ice Crown. Even though it was very, very weak, Antonidas would never mistake it for someone else. After all, in this world, other than that kid, there was no one else who knew these two arcane circuits. What the hell? Duke Marcus was still alive. Antonidas's mind went blank for a moment. He completely forgot why he spread out his senses. Chapter 506. The people of Lordaeron very quickly ran into trouble. To be honest, this was not their fault. If one disregarded Du's actions, there was no problem with their surprise attack. The fault was that they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, and met the wrong people. If they had come a few days earlier, they would have met with the emptiness of grim battle. At that time, the entire fortress only had the chief of the Dragonmaw clan, Zulud. If they had come later, when the tribe had finished adjusting, there would not have been so many gods. But to say that the people of Lordaeron were unlucky was the same thing. At this point in time, the entire tribe, other than the two brothers Rend and Maim who were sent to kill Gul Hadan, and Grom Hellscream who was still being chased in the Tirisful forest, happened to have a meeting with a large number of chiefs. Yes. It was in this grim battle that the meeting was held. Just yesterday, Great Chief Orgrim, who had just barely escaped with his life, had left his deputy Sabek behind after making arrangements for the war in the Arthi Highlands. After that, a large number of chiefs had come to a meeting, and it was a secret meeting. Orgrim, Kilrog Deadeye, Zulud, Cashdrake, Rexer, Kargath Bladefist, and a large number of chiefs from second-tier clans. Because it was a secret meeting, of course it would not be a big deal. The moment grim battle was ambushed, Orgrim's reddish-brown face almost turned green like his compatriots. Operation Decapitation. Duque gave Orgrim too much pressure. Without knowing that Duque was also in trouble, Orgrim almost immediately thought that it was Duque's plan. For a moment, Orgrim was on the verge of collapse, but the chief was still the chief. After sending some ordinary soldiers to test the waters, he immediately had a plan. Sitting at the head of the table, Orgrim calmly asked, "Is the human portal still open?" "Yes." Zulud replied. "Kargath, bring your people and Rexer to block the portal." "Understood." The one-armed Kargath waved the blade attached to his broken arm, revealing a cruel and bloodthirsty smile. "Zuluhid, tell Nekros to hide." "Yes." "As for the others, follow me to the Alliance to get a piece of meat." As he finished, his burly body suddenly stood up. Everyone could see Orgrim gripping the infamous Hammer of Destruction tightly. The people of Rotterdam were dumbfounded. After all, this wasn't their territory. Even with the map provided by the bronze-bearded dwarves, not everyone could clearly find their way in the middle of a bloody battle. Apart from the unlucky ones who were smashed to death on the spot, the people of the Rotterdam kingdom were dumbfounded, especially when the roof of the main passage of the fortress suddenly collapsed, and a large number of powerful people jumped down. The Alliance and the Horde had been fighting for a long time, and everyone knew each other very well. Everyone knew that the Alliance relied on formations. The infantry shield formation at the front opened up the path, the spearmen and great swordsmen in the middle, the formation mages and archers at the back, and the priests to heal them. If he could grind down the energy consumption, he could teach the beast men how to behave. The Horde's strength lay in the quality of the individual soldiers. Once it got into a chaotic battle, an orc could easily kill 10 human infantrymen. The Horde's attack this time was aimed at the Alliance's weak spot. The warriors of the Broken Palm clan appeared out of nowhere and cut off the Alliance's formation in an instant. They blocked the entrance of the Alliance's teleportation portal. In just one exchange, more than 20 priests were killed in an instant. The sharp blade attached to the arm caused the Church of Light to suffer the most tragic loss since the start of the war. There was a limited number of descendants of the teleportation portal, and those who could come were the elites of the elites. These priests, any one of them was a bishop of a region. Their deaths were definitely a huge loss to the Alliance. Moreover, the Alliance's unique strategy of fight, get injured, recover, fight again was broken, and the psychological impact on the Alliance's soldiers was definitely huge. Think about it, with these nannies and dads around, as long as they had a breath left, they might be able to be saved. Without them, serious injuries meant death. How could the psychological pressure be the same? Far away in the Dalajan, Terinas, who was sitting on the balcony, saw this and his face turned green. "Master, please hold on for a while. I'm afraid we have to send reinforcements." It was impossible for such a huge operation to not have a backup plan. That was, of course, Uther's silver hand. Almost as soon as he saw that the passage was sealed, Uther had already taken the lead and rushed over. Behind him, Tyrion Fordring also rushed over with his warhammer. Beside them were 50 silver-hand paladins. However, as soon as they rushed over, they found that the battlefield was still too narrow. As the gate of a stronghold, the main passage, which was 50 meters wide, was definitely not narrow. But for a battlefield, it was undoubtedly at the level of a narrow path. The two sides fought close to the entrance of the teleportation portal. This time, the Alliance suffered a big loss. No one dared to blast magic over the portal, because it would affect the stability of the portal. They could only rely on hand-to-hand combat and bows and arrows. In a normal battle, would the Broken Palm clan be afraid of this? Kargath against Uther. Rexer against Tyrion. Both sides were evenly matched. It seemed to be a stalemate here, but the problem inside was huge. Their retreat was cut off, which in itself affected their morale. When Orgrim arrived with a group of ferocious chieftains, Abendus and Saden's faces turned green. They never thought that the tribe's best fighters were almost all here. This pair of founders of the Scarlet Crusade in the future barely held off the chiefs of 4 second-tier clans. But that didn't stop Orgrim from sneering as he led a large group of the most powerful chieftains to slaughter them. Shields were the best against swords and knives, and the worst against heavy weapons. When Orgrim, who swung a hammer that weighed more than 100 kilograms like a toy, appeared, for the first time, the Alliance soldiers realized that they could become part of a force of 1,000 men, well, those small soldiers who were sent flying. With a sweep of the hammer, at least 5 or 6 Alliance elites were sent flying, or had their arms and legs broken, or their bodies twisted. Only the paladins who activated their invincibility could survive a hit from the hammer. Since that was the case, when the paladins, who looked like big golden eggs, were sent flying, they also knocked into many of their comrades like bowling pins. The hammer of destruction, stained with human flesh and bones, was overflowing with ferocity. At this moment, anyone would think that this terrifying hammer was a divine artifact. The Alliance was defeated, and the elite soldiers of Rotterdam were reduced at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. No, General Abendus was furious. He almost went crazy. After all, those who died were his most elite subordinates. Many of them had followed him for at least 5 years. But now, it was like a sickle cutting the wheat in the field, the grass was being cut. He did not know what was going on, but this time, Rotterdam was really in trouble. Chapter 507. Actually, the people of Rotterdam were very unlucky this time. If Duque had not crossed the wetlands to lure out the wings of death, the 3 young red dragons would not have been killed, and the Dragon Maw clan would not have been so tense. The young red dragons were not just any ordinary people. They were at least as strong as the chiefs in the tribe. It was no wonder the tribe was shocked when 3 of them died in a few days. Without that, Zulud would not have let the 100,000 tribes gather near Grim Battle. There was no need for Orgrim to hold a meeting at the tribe's gathering point. There were many things that were interconnected. Rotterdam, who had rashly intervened for the sake of their reputation, happened to see the 100,000 horses running around, and almost lost all their money. Not only was Orgrim leading the slaughter inside, but the situation outside was not quiet either. Zulud immediately flew his red dragon through the special entrance of the dragon tribe to the entrance below the fortress, and let the dragon breathe dragon breath at the portal. To put it bluntly, the portal was a condensation of magic power. If the brainless orcs used axes and hammers to attack it, even 10,000 people would not be able to do anything. But dragon breath was different. The essence of dragon breath was fire elemental energy. Although enough fire elemental energy would not destroy the portal, it would put a greater burden on it. The mages in the Dalajan were in a difficult situation. Who's attacking the portal? The mages found that their mana consumption was increasing. It was already difficult to maintain a portal that could transport dozens of people at the same time, but now it was even more difficult. Bastard. It's the red dragon again. Antonidas obviously knew what it was. King Tarina's face was drained of blood. The infantry could no longer break through the situation. If they wanted to change the situation, they would either have to sacrifice themselves and let the people at the door retreat, or they would have to send in an overwhelming force. No matter how he looked at it, the tribe was well prepared. He tried asking, "Can the Dalijan send in more mages?" Antonidas glared at him. "How dare you ask me to send my precious high-level mages into such a messy battle?" Mages were definitely treasured by the humans and the entire alliance. The Dalijan Academy mages, in particular, were the worst at messy battles. It was generally accepted that the way mages were used was to suppress their opponents in positional battles. Terena's suggestion, in the ears of the Kirin Tor chairman, was like sending him to his death. It was time to test Terena's courage. If they retreated like this, they would lose at least half of their elites and gain nothing. If they continued to send more troops, the situation might not be good. Instead, it might cause more experts to fall into the trap. Terena's was not satisfied. That should have been a great opportunity for the Rotterdam Kingdom to make a name for themselves and show off their might. Why did Duke kill tens of thousands of elite orcs in a few moves? Why did it seem like sending the elites to their deaths when it was his turn? The old king's clenched fists trembled. There was no need for others to remind him that he had to make a decision. At this time, Antonidas suddenly thought of something and said, "Your Majesty, you don't have to be so pessimistic. When I opened the portal just now, I sensed the magical wave of Sir Marcus. He seems to be in grim battle." Hearing this, Terenas, who understood the hidden meaning behind the words of the Archmage, almost vomited blood. He did not trust Duque and sent over 1,000 elites, but in the end, he was just pretending to attack for Duque? Wait a minute. Wasn't Duque about to die? How did he manage to sneak into the fortress while being surrounded by tens of thousands of orcs? This time, not only did the Rotterdam Kingdom's fists tremble, even his body was shaking. Terenas was shocked. Lang and Andoin were overjoyed. The two brothers looked at each other and saw the joy in each other's eyes. Duque was still alive. Lang could not suppress his excitement and quickly went forward. "What's wrong with Duque? Can you sense his condition?" Antonidas nodded. "I don't know about his physical condition, but his magical wave is not weakened at all." Hearing this, all the kings were moved. It did not matter if Duque was about to die or not, at least he could fight. Those who had seen Duque in action knew that Duque could not be considered a Morning Star mage. In group battles, he was even crazier than many Radiant Moon mages. Moreover, his various miracles in the past always made people think positively of him. At this moment, the clouds above Grim Battle Fortress suddenly rolled back layer by layer, forming a huge hole in the sky. Endless fire poured down from the hole. The entire mountain top was covered in fiery red. Ancient dragons? Another primordial dragon had arrived at this time. Just how many ancient dragons did the Horde control? How many ancient dragons did they control? Just as everyone's expressions changed again, the scene suddenly changed. No one had expected a gigantic red dragon to launch an attack on the young red dragons hovering in the sky as it descended from the sky. It was not the dragon breath unique to the dragon race, nor was it a melee attack. It was an endless magical attack. Ice, fire, and arcane magic. The three violent offensive spells turned into a dazzling magic storm that blasted towards every red dragon that tried to stop it. What? Could this red dragon be from the Alliance? Everyone who witnessed this scene was dumbfounded. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Only Antonidas and the Dalijan looked to his side thoughtfully. The Kirin Tor counselors were missing one, Krasis. That's right. The red dragon in the sky was Krasis, one of the 6 counselors in the Dalijan who had been in human form all this time. He was now the red dragon Claustraz. Krasis fought hard in the sky. Even though he had already stepped into the ranks of the ancient dragons, he was not at ease when facing so many powerful compatriots. He was shocked to find that the young dragons had been brainwashed under the influence of the demon's soul. They unconsciously began to agree with the orc's orders. He was cautious when dealing with them, but they surrounded him without hesitation. Croesus gritted his teeth and dodged left and right in the sky. However, at this critical moment, he still sent a magical message to someone. Duke Marcus. I don't know what other trump cards you have. But I've used all the tricks I can. The rest is up to you. I'm counting on you. You must save Queen Alexstrasza. At this moment, Duque, who had fallen into a deep sleep at the secret passage of Grim Battle Fortress, suddenly opened his eyes. He replied with a magical message. Wait for me. Chapter 508. Croesus was in a sorry state, but he was extremely excited. Twisting left and right, he seemed to be on the brink of death, but he was able to play tricks under the siege of several young dragons. He used all sorts of unimaginable spells and agility that did not match his huge body to teach the young dragons how to fight. Even though his injuries were worsening, even though his actions were getting worse, there was still a fire burning in his chest. His fighting spirit was still boiling. One after another, the young dragons lost the ability to fight without being fatally injured. Croesus was still holding on because of a message from Duque. Wait for me. If someone else had sent it to him, he would have snorted. But the person who sent it was Duque, the most legendary young man in the entire alliance, or even the entire Azeroth. These two words exuded a strange magic. These two words represented an unparalleled miracle. Croesus unleashed the strongest combat power he had in his life, at the entrance of the secret tunnel. Duque looked up at the sky. He could not see the intense battle in the sky from his angle, but he could tell from the continuous dragon roars that Croesus was doing well. Suddenly, he waved to the people below. Sasha, call everyone up. Sasha was stunned by this wave of his hand. It was not just her. No one knew why Duque was so confident after a nap. Of course, it could be imagined that Duque had used the surprise attack of the Lordaeron people and the unexpected red dragon as a cover for his real attack. But she felt that it was not that simple. Come up, I've gathered all the cards. Duque stood at the entrance. The strong mountain wind made Duque's magician robe flap loudly. His short hair made him look energetic. Most importantly, Duque's lips were curled up in a confident smile. Just as Sasha and the others sprinted towards the entrance, a large line of words appeared in the mental isolation zone that Duque had set up. Go, my little slave. It's time to save the Red Dragon Queen. Find her and recite the incantation, Azadilu. Alexstrasza shall receive the redemption she deserves. The long incantation was followed by a bewitching sentence. Duque pretended to be absent-minded, but a moment later, his thoughts seemed to return to the right track. Sasha and the rest did not stay too far away. In fact, after the people of the Rotterdam Kingdom started their attack, they were already less than 200 meters away from Duque. In a few moments, they had arrived in front of Duque. It was only a distance of less than 10 breaths, but Sasha was extremely agitated. Her perfectly plump breasts rose and fell rapidly. She couldn't care less about using her fingers to comb her scattered silver hair. She asked with great concern almost immediately, Duque. Are you all right? I'm fine, how about you? Duque replied with a smile. I'm fine too. For some reason, looking at Duque's gentle and confident smile, Sasha felt flustered. This feeling became clearer with Duque's next words. No, you're not fine. I feel like you're a little old. Her heart was beating very quickly. It was so powerful that she felt like her heart would jump out of her chest at any moment. After pulling the bowstring countless times, her usually steady hands were trembling for some reason. Sasha bit her lip, her cheeks and neck were slightly red that she could not hide. You. Don't worry about me for now. Are you really all right? I was. When Duque said this, Sasha's heart skipped a beat. However, Duque's next words took a turn. I'm fine after seeing you. You. Even if Sasha was really thick-skinned, she had to give in after being teased and attacked by Duque. Moreover, Sasha had never been thick-skinned. Sasha had arrived first with her high agility and speed. The other three had just climbed up the hill. Duque smiled and turned around elegantly. All right, the best singer always goes on stage last. Let's not waste this precious opportunity. Everyone was here. Let's go. Everyone could feel Duque's surging confidence. No one knew where his confidence came from, but everyone believed it. He really couldn't figure out if this was a person's name, the shadow of a tree, or if Duke's body had really changed. I'll go first. For once, Gavin Rad was not a spectator. He took out his shield and one-handed hammer and prepared to open a path in the dark cave. No need. We won't have any enemies before the little red dragon appears. F***CK. We still have to fight the red dragon? Apart from Marion, the other three were all shocked. Damn it, they really did not understand why the red dragon army was so obedient to the tribe. Gavin Rad cursed the tribe, but he did not try to persuade Duque. He was very clear about his position. He was just a worker. Working obediently would naturally be beneficial. Also, he was quite satisfied with his current situation. The group followed Duque through the dark, narrow, and long cave. After about 4 or 5 minutes, the tunnel before them suddenly opened up. It was a huge funnel-shaped cave. They had just walked to a relatively open area when the darkness ahead suddenly changed. There was nothing in front of them even with Sasha's night vision, but it was as if a black curtain had suddenly fallen. 2 golden vertical pupils larger than baskets appeared in front of the 5 frighteningly. His long and sharp fangs shone with a cold, violent light even in the darkness. Dragon. A red dragon that had used draconic magic to ambush itself. It was at least a young dragon. Not only did it fool Duque and Sasha, but it even fooled Marion. The powerful illusion that did not have any magical fluctuations instantly brought the entire team of 5 into its attack range. It smiled slyly. Even though it looked no different from the standard dragon breath of a dragon, its open mouth and upturned lips made it seem like it was smiling. It was laughing at the stupidity of humans and elves. It was also laughing at its own success. Everyone could foresee that in at most 2 or 3 seconds, the entire huge dark space would be completely covered by the red dragon's blazing dragon breath. Gavin Rad, Marion, Ronan, and Sasha all made their most instinctive defensive moves. Just then, an invisible aura was released from Duque's body. A kind of writing momentum, something that could be read as pretentious, was released by him. At the same time, he threw something out from his left hand. It was obviously from a huge spatial storage bag. After it left the storage bag, it suddenly became incomparably huge. In just a second, everyone, including the dragon opposite them, saw what it was. That was the ferocious dragon head of the 3rd generation red dragon, Grizzla, who was the best at fighting. Chapter 509. This scene was very strange, but also very funny. The 4 people around Duque were all panicking. They had almost activated their invincibility skills and fridges. Only Duque had his hands behind his back. He stood tall and straight like a pine tree, putting on a handsome show in the mountain wind. As for the other side, the mysterious red dragon that had been prepared to greet Duque's group with a blazing dragon's breath was even funnier. More than half of the dragon's breath had come out of its throat, but it was swallowed back by the red dragon as if it was swallowing saliva. What the heck? You can swallow the flames you spat out? Why don't you show what you eat and shit? Cough cough. After a while, the 4 people around Duque were embarrassed. They had thought that there would be a fierce battle. Who knew that after Duque threw out a dragon's head, the red dragon would give up? That's right. It really gave up. Actually, it was not the red dragon's fault. Ancient dragons were not cabbages that could be found anywhere they wanted. Kurtzla was the famous leader of the 3rd generation of dragons in the red dragon army. Had he climbed a mountain of swords? Had he seen a pot of boiling oil? Had he seen someone swallow 10,000-year-old ice as ice cream? She did see after. That's right. That was what Kurtzla had done. All right, Kurtzla, who didn't believe in superstitions and dared to try anything and kill anything, now had his dragon's head, which was bigger than a small house, appear in front of her. Seeing the arrogant Kurtzla's eyes wide open in anger, it would be strange if the little female dragon did not pee in her pants. Dragon's breath could not be swallowed easily. A large amount of dragon breath could not find a place to vent, and could only come out through the gaps of her teeth and nose, choking her half to death. She was so stunned that she did not dare to spray this dragon breath on Duke. His long snake-like neck quickly turned and spat the dragon's breath to the side. Cough. 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 The little female dragon choked so hard that her tears almost flowed out. Ronan, Sasha, Marion, Gavin Rad, silence. Dead silence. In the huge, dark cave, only the sound of the little female dragon's bitter coughs could be heard. What the hell was this? Sasha and the other three looked at Duque with admiration that was beyond reason. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what Duque would do next. Duque slowly raised his right hand, palm facing upwards. Ronan, where's the little thing Krasis gave you? Give it to me. How did Duque know that Krasis had given him a small talisman? However, he did not hesitate. Duque was the leader of the team. Not only was he the leader of the team, but he was also the leader of half of the alliance. He admired and respected Duke very much, so he didn't hesitate to hand over Krasis's trinket to Duke without the slightest hesitation. Krasis had told him that he couldn't give it to anyone else. Duque took it and casually tossed it away. The silver earring drew a beautiful arc in the air that cut through the darkness. It flew in front of the little female dragon, bounced twice on the ground, and stopped moving. The little female dragon finally caught her breath. She looked at the trinket on the ground and was speechless. Of course she knew what the higher-ups meant. Duque's confident voice sounded again. Choose. Become the second Graz, or do us a small favor. Duque's lips curled into a sinister smile. He seemed to be waiting for the little female dragon to reject him so that he could publicly slaughter her. Who would have thought that the little female dragon would choose neither? Her huge yellow pupils rolled around as she spoke in the human language. I must be seeing things because I've been on too many missions recently. This won't do. I need to catch up on some sleep while I'm on sentry duty. With that, she swayed her huge body and curled up in a corner of the huge cave like a puppy. She curled up and slept. Yes, I'm sleeping. I didn't see anything. I don't care if you believe it or not, I believe it. That was what the little female dragon was implying. At this moment, the world seemed to fall silent. Windsor and the others were completely speechless. That worked? Was this guy a dragon or a profiteer selling fake goods in the antique market? Duca scared the dragon just like that, and it was terrified? Duque, who had retracted his dragon head, should have led everyone over. However, Duque suddenly turned around quickly and took a step towards the little female dragon. His right hand even shone with the light of magic. No matter how you look at it, it looks like Duke is about to make a move. As expected, the little female dragon, who had been pretending to sleep, jumped up. Almost all the scales on her body stood up. She looked like a frightened cat. Who knew that Duque would raise his hand and cast a small illumination spell? Duque looked calm, as if he had done nothing. No, I just wanted to ask. Do you know where your queen is trapped? Which path is closer? The little female dragon was aggrieved. The little female dragon wanted to kill someone. Tears almost spurted out of her eyes. I'm a young dragon over 1,000 years old. You can't bully a dragon like this. She cursed Duque's ancestors in her heart and pointed at a cave entrance. Alright, she couldn't even pretend to sleep anymore. The little female dragon could only watch warily as Duque left. The moment they left the dragon cave, the four heaved sighs of relief. Yes. Ronan knelt. Marion knelt. Windsor knelt. Gavinrad knelt too. Boss, you really scared me to death. I was ready to fight a dragon. Gavinrad looked like he was wiping sweat, but there wasn't a drop on his forehead. Duque shrugged. You can't. We've all seen this dragon. When we killed the first dragon, she was the one that patrolled over. She didn't have the courage to fight then, and she definitely won't now. Windsor was convinced by Duque's words. All right, where do we go now? Go down. The others didn't know where to go, but Deathwing did. This guy was extremely annoyed as he muttered silently, directly crossing space and entering Duke's mental isolation layer. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even if Duque closed his eyes, he wouldn't get lost. Suddenly, Duque sighed. He took out a handful of magic crystals from his storage bag and handed them to Ronan. Sir, this is too valuable. Ronan didn't know what to do. First, I need your fighting power. Second, isn't this a good chance to improve your spellcasting? Kill all the beastmen you see later. Duque was right. Orgrim couldn't let the Horde's trump card be destroyed by the Alliance just like that. In fact, after leaving the Dragon Cave, Duque's group started encountering large numbers of beastmen guards. Whoosh! 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 The four of them were dumbfounded as they looked at Duke, who was strolling leisurely in front of the orc guards that kept surging out, as if they had seen a ghost. Chapter 5:10. Noises, screams, wails, and all sorts of other noises came from the surface. In the narrow cave, the echoes could be heard from far away. Everyone in the team could hear that the humans were at a disadvantage. Compared to the excited cheers of the orcs, the cries of the humans were filled with tragedy. Hang in there. Fight as hard as you can. Was this what people who had the upper hand would say? The pessimistic aura coming from the vent above their heads became a different scene when it came to the people in front of them. Duque walked quickly, and a wave of cold air with a radius of more than 30 meters moved along with Duque's movements. The four people walking inside did not feel anything, but once the orcs touched it, there would be a crisp and beautiful sound of ice freezing. Without even looking, the hand of magic floating around Duque would shoot an ice spear at his face. In the frozen state, the attack power of the ice spear was extremely exaggerated. The huge mana produced by the magic chain reaction was like adding fuel to the fire, enough to turn most of the orcs into corpses in an instant. Even killing pigs and dogs was not as easy as Duque. Above their heads, the elites of the Rotterdam Kingdom were utterly defeated. The portal had collapsed, and the remaining humans had to fight their way to the narrower side roads, relying on the terrain to resist. They were like blind flies in the complicated tunnels of the grim battle fortress. It could be imagined that there would only be a small number of lucky people who would be able to kill their way out and escape in the end. In the underground tunnel, Duque was chasing the tribe like rabbits. This was quite ironic. Duque pushed forward quickly, and of course, did not forget to help the two poor guys. Above them, Abendis and Saidan Dathrahan were still fighting. The two of them were no longer in the same position as before. Even if they did not want to admit it, they had to admit that the Rotterdam raid was over. Just this loss alone was enough to make King Terina's sleepless for many months. While Orgrim was leading the chieftains on a killing spree, Saidan activated her invincibility and used the holy light from Wrath to force away the two chieftains who were fighting her, and rushed to Abendis' side. On the battlefield, Saidan couldn't care less about his chivalrous demeanor. He directly smashed the back of the head of a chief who was attacking Abisti with his hammer and roared, "Go! Where do you think you're going?" Abendis, who was covered in wounds, also forced back the remaining chief with a single move. "Anywhere is fine, don't wait for death here." Saidan was ready to risk it all. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly came from the fishy wind. It was a sound that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. "Yo, I'm Duque. If you're not dead, then get down here." This young master will bring you guys to turn the tables. Puff. Pooh. Saidan spat out, while Abendus spat out a mouthful of blood. What the hell? Why did Duque suddenly jump out of a rock and appear at the most critical point while we were fighting for our lives here? Saidan and Abendus looked at each other. Abendus was still a little suspicious. Isn't Marcus dead? Duque's voice came from the wind again. F***ck, if you don't get down here, I'll kill you first. There wasn't a commanding tone, nor was there the usual polite atmosphere in the command center. There was only a ruffian aura that Abendus had never heard before. Saidan shrugged. I'll bet a copper that it's him. I'm not betting with you. General Abendus bared his teeth and waved his hand, summoning the dozen or so Alliance elites nearby. With a loud shout, he killed his way through a small path. Duque stepped on the red blood and stood in front of a huge iron gate. Beside him were naturally the four-man team and a ground full of beastman corpses. Even with beastman's height, they would feel small and powerless in front of such a huge iron gate that was more than 40 meters tall. The Red Dragon Queen is in here? Sasha asked softly. Duque nodded. Yes, but this is where the test begins. Actually, there had been a test just now, but Duque had scared the little female dragon so much that she pissed her pants, so he passed. Glancing at the notification in his vision, Duque said, Marion, come in with me. The three of you, try your best to defend this place while we go in to deal with the Guardians. If there are too many chiefs, retreat to the Iron Gate. Duque pointed at the Iron Gate beside the Iron Gate. A paladin, a ranger, and a half-baked wizard. This strange combination of defending this huge tunnel didn't seem reliable at all. No one objected because this was Duque's decision, and it was a reasonable one. The Guardians of Demon's Soul weren't just anyone. They were worthy of being the two strongest fighters, Duque and Marion. And they had to defend this place to the death. Gavin Rad checked his equipment again. He first carried the shield on his back and hung the one-handed hammer on his waist. Then, he took out a huge two-handed hammer from his inventory and tied the handle of the hammer to the handle. Sasha jumped onto a protruding rock beside the iron gate. Because the rock was high on the outside and low on the inside, Sasha treated it as an archery tower. She took out 3 quivers of arrows and fixed them on the wall. Ronan gritted his teeth and started absorbing the magic crystals he got from Duque like crazy. Just then, a commotion came from the cave entrance. The battered Saidan Dathrahan and General Abendus had finally arrived with 6 or 7 knights. However, the ones chasing after them were the chieftains of the strongest first-line clans, led by Chieftain Orgrim of the Horde. Seeing that Saidan and Abendus had managed to get here, Duque smiled. He shouted at the paladin who was being chased like a dog, "Help me defend for 20 minutes." With that, he didn't care about Saidan's reaction and brought Marion through the iron gate. Oh no. It's Duke Marcus again. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his heart, Orgrim's heart sank into the abyss the moment he caught sight of Duke in his field of vision. Duque. Duque. It was Duque again. Every time the tribe was about to win, Duque would always come out and mess things up. Again and again. Again and again, he was kicked from the clouds of victory that was within his reach to hell. Orgrim couldn't take it anymore. Du-ku, a thunderous roar came from the sky, shaking the entire tunnel. Countless pieces of sand and stones fell from the top of the cave, making it seem as if the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. Chapter 5:11. Great Chief Orgrim's lungs were about to explode from anger. As a ferocious warrior, Orgrim had never believed in fate or anything like that. He had failed time and time again. Even Orgrim, who had an incomparably firm will, started to waver. Is Duque really my nemesis? When this question appeared in his mind, he could no longer suppress the uneasiness in his heart. Every night, he would dream of his own failure. He would remember the pain and anger that Duque had brought him. He could not suppress it. Orgrim pointed to the top of the cave and took up a stance with his right hand. In the next moment, Orgrim used his famous hammer of destruction as a super-large, hidden weapon. The sudden burst of magma-like heat increased the temperature of the entire tunnel. Everyone's field of vision was lit up. The scorching heat came from afar, and the surging wave of heat passed through the gap between Abendus and Sidan. The irresistible heat made the two scream in pain, and they quickly dodged to the left and right. Even so, their arms were still stained with magma-like viscous substance. The horrifying heat passed through the gauntlet and traveled to their arms, and they both felt a burning pain on their skin. Ah! Abendus could not help but pull out the short sword tied to his thigh, and cut off the ropes on the gauntlet. Before the heat completely burned his arm to the gauntlet, he clenched his teeth and tore off the gauntlet, not caring that it was stuck to his hair and a small piece of skin. Ugh! Holy knights always took advantage. Under the protection of the holy light, Sidan took off the gauntlet and threw it away without any injuries. At this moment, the one who felt the most numb was Gavinrad. Soldiers trained for 1,000 days were used in a single moment. Whether it was to save energy for Duque to deal with the protectors, or to maintain Duque's cool, Gavinrad had to take this blow for Duque. If it was the old Gavinrad, he would not be able to take it with just the holy light. However, after Duque released the shackles of fate, the strengthened version of Gavinrad could still put up a fight. Gavinrad swung his giant iron two-handed hammer like he was playing golf. It drew a huge arc on the ground and accurately met Orgrim's hammer of destruction. The lightning energy awakened from the storm altar crashed into Orgrim's flame energy. The collision of the two violent elemental energies instantly lit up the entire underground passageway as if it was daytime. The corpses on the ground suddenly jumped up as if they had come back to life due to the vibrations of the power. Soon after, they were either burnt to a crisp by the uncontrollable flames and lightning power, or directly carbonized by the lightning power. The violent elemental energy spread in all directions, and the huge tiles on the floor of the passageway stacked up layer by layer like broken waves. It was a ghastly sight. It was like experiencing a small, terrifying earthquake. Gavinrad was in a sorry state, but he managed to hold on. It was impossible for Orgrim's flying hammers to be replenished every second. Gavinrad's quality was not good enough, but he was good enough. At that moment, Gavinrad did not know how many times he had cheered for himself. The result of the collision of the two hammers was that Gavinrad sent, hammer of destruction, flying like a high-flying ball. Duque's face was momentarily stunned. Then, Duque revealed a smile that Orgrim wanted to slap him to death 10,000 times. At this time, Duque actually had the time to wave his hand and make a bye-bye gesture to Orgrim. Ah! Orgrim was on the verge of losing his mind. As he charged, he picked up a large hammer that was obviously used by a centurion and charged forward. Behind him, Kilrog and the other chieftains charged forward as well. At this critical moment, a new group of Alliance army arrived. They were Uther and Tyrion Fordring. After knowing that Duque was still there, Tyrrhenus finally made the decision to raise the stakes. He sent the last reserve team over as well. This decision directly caused most of the top forces of the Alliance and the Horde to start a decisive battle in this rather narrow passage for an army. After entering the Iron Gate, it was pitch black. The Red Dragon Queen is imprisoned here? Marion, who was holding her staff, was confused. Her vision was not as good as Sasha's, but her night vision talents still allowed her to see further and clearer than Duque's. What entered her vision was a vast expanse of emptiness. Just be careful. Almost as soon as Duque finished speaking, the air in front of them suddenly flashed, and thousands of small fireballs exploded out of thin air. These fireballs spun quickly and merged with each other. Finally, they formed a blurry human figure, and the silhouette quickly became clear. This was a huge flaming puppet, the guardian of Demon's Soul. It was a magical life form that was unknown to outsiders. Get out of my way. Marion roared angrily, and her staff shone brightly. Without the silk wrapping around it, Marion's staff revealed its beautiful appearance. The staff was dark red, and the tip was made of an unknown jade material. It was a pure, beautiful, naked flaming angel. As she roared, the dark red staff in her hands suddenly brightened, and a narrow beam of light flashed from the tip. In the next second, a demon soul, guardian that was pouncing towards Duque and Marion was split in half by the blue arcane light. There was no blazing light like the sun, nor was there any sharp light. With just one simple move, the guardian of the demon soul, which was created by the 4 dragon kings, was killed. Duque looked at this scene in shock. He finally had a clear understanding of the power of this delicate and seemingly weak female counselor of the Silver Moon Parliament. Go. I can't hold it for long. Duque's right eyelid twitched. He suddenly realized that the damned flaming puppet had appeared again, roaring and pouncing towards them. This time, Marion used the same trick again, but it didn't get the desired effect. The flaming puppet took the hit head-on, and only paused for a moment before it continued to attack expressionlessly. Marion had to use another powerful spell that Duque didn't know about to destroy the flaming puppet again. Duque gritted his teeth. Marion, be careful. Hurry up, I can't last long. Marion smiled bitterly. Duque took out the Grand Marshal's battle staff, and flashed deeper into the fortress. Chapter 5:12. At this moment, the atmosphere in the Dalian kingdom was extremely strange. The elites of the Rotterdam have been defeated? Don't be afraid, we still have His Excellency Duke Marcus. Yes. As long as he's here, we have nothing to fear. A large-scale elite assault battle that could have been recorded in history and surpassed the imagination of mortals had become the biggest joke. Just like how the silly orcs had fought with the humans on the vast sea, only to be killed. Today, the Rotterdam kingdom had become the biggest joke. More than half of the kingdom's elite knights had been slaughtered in less than an hour. King Turinas could totally imagine that he would be criticized by the nobles of the Rotterdam kingdom in the following days. If it was just a simple defeat, it would be fine. If they were to lose, they would lose together. At most, the whole of the Rotterdam kingdom would suffer together, and everyone would go home to lick their wounds. But Duque had appeared. Duque, who was thought to have died somewhere, actually appeared again, and perfectly used the elites of the Rotterdam kingdom as bait to lure away a large number of chiefs. What happened to being the leader? How did the great Rotterdam kingdom become a sacrificial pawn? King Turinas felt a surge of anger in his chest, and he almost fainted on the spot. Turinas' face was very, very black, as if he had touched charcoal. His whole body was trembling. Others might think that he was sad about the loss of the elites, but only he knew that he had developed a grudge against a junior that he had always looked down on. Be it Anduin Lothar or Duke Marcus, these 2 candidates for the commander-in-chief of the alliance were the only way out. Using the noble Lothar as a mascot, and then kicking Duque away when the war was not going well. That was what Turinas had thought. With these 2 scapegoats, it was only natural for the general of the Rotterdam kingdom to be promoted to the commander-in-chief of the alliance. Who would have known that Anduin and Duque worked together perfectly? One controlled the western battlefield, and the other coordinated the entire alliance perfectly, organizing many successful military operations, and expanding the alliance from 8 to 10? Just thinking about it made him mad. In exchange for a compromise, 2 country bumpkins from a remote southern country became the heroes of the alliance. His Rotterdam kingdom had contributed money, manpower, and effort in exchange for a core position. Look at the way the kings were looking at Turinas now. They were all mocking him, as if he was an idiot. Turinas almost wanted to send someone to kill Duque on the spot. But he resisted. Whether it could solve the problem of the Red Dragon Queen was still unknown. If he were to trip Duque up at this juncture, firstly, he would not be able to make it in time, and secondly, the alliance would really collapse. That would not be beneficial to the Rotterdam kingdom at all. Even though he knew that he was on the verge of losing control, the self-restraint of a veteran politician suppressed his emotional impulses, allowing his intense heartbeat to gradually calm down. It seems that we old bones are still outdated. The future of the alliance still depends on Marcus and the other youngsters. He was no longer upset, no longer agitated. If he did not lose control just a moment ago, everyone would think that Tarinas was a kind elder who took care of the younger generation. That's right, Tarinas had decided that since he could not suppress Duque, he would kill him by praising him. According to his experience, he would definitely not be able to see through this kind of overt plot. Once he got carried away, it would be the time for him to fall into hell. Tarina's lips curled into a cold smile. Unfortunately, Tarinas would definitely fail. Duque was not some ignorant 16-year-old from a small village in Azeroth. Duque had no way of knowing what Tarinas was thinking. He did not take the loss of the Rotterdam Kingdom to heart. It was true that the Rotterdam Kingdom's unintentional attack helped him take the bullet. This was definitely unexpected. From the beginning to the end, Duque had never thought of tricking the Rotterdam Kingdom. This was a battle that transcended the mortal world. Why did the small Rotterdam Kingdom come here to interfere? Was it my fault that Tarinas was looking for trouble? No. I will not take the blame for this. Duque focused on finding Alexstrasza. From beginning to end, the Red Dragon Queen and the Black Dragon King, the two ancient dragon aspects, were the main focus of this show. Unfortunately, Duque did not know what was going to happen next. As a butterfly that incited the general trend and changed history, Duque had changed too many things. In the original history, because the main force of Orgrim had been destroyed, only the Dragonmaw clan was left to defend Grimbader. In the absence of Zulud, the orc warlock Necros who controlled the demon's soul, used the most idiotic method. He brought a large number of red dragon eggs with him and ran away from Grimbader. Now, the main force of the orcs had not completely collapsed. The horde was still strong, not to mention they had the help of several ancient red dragons. It was unlikely that Necros would run away. So, this was likely to be a tough battle. As expected, Necros came. Silently, an ugly orc's head seemed to be floating in the darkness. The dark blue light that flowed in the darkness reflected half of the old green face that was full of curves. The long facial hair looked like withered grass rooted in the cracked earth. The orc warlock's cheeks were deeply sunken, and the dull luster on his face reminded people of a corpse. Necros pursed his lips tightly. His thick lips seemed to have two sharp stones on them, propping up two openings in his lower jaw, exposing his fangs. His hood was embroidered with demonic incantations, and the shadows that extended from it covered his eye sockets. The deeply sunken eyes emitted a deathly light in the darkness. If not for the fact that he could still feel his breath, Duque would have thought that he had encountered an undead, and not a living orc. Necros spoke in a voice that reminded people of death. His common language was terrible, and Duque could barely understand him. Duke Marcus, the nightmare of the horde. I did not think that you would come. Duque leaned on his staff. To this world, your horde is the nightmare. He. Necros let out a rough and unpleasant laugh. Unfortunately, after today, only one of the two nightmares will remain. Necros was right. The Red Dragon Army was the last card of the horde. After losing the main forces of the Blackstone and Warsong clans, the horde no longer had the upper hand in terms of quantity and quality. And the terrifying military mobilization ability of the alliance had only just been revealed. Duque curled his lips and imposed a conclusion on this meaningless argument. You die, I live. Chapter 5:13. Ha ha ha. Ignorant human, you don't understand the power and greatness of Demon's soul. That's right, I don't understand. Duque admitted the first half of the sentence. However, he did not say the second half. What I don't understand is how much of the power of Demon's soul you can use. The predecessor of Demon's soul was the Dragon's soul. This was the ultimate move used by the dragons to destroy the invading Burning Legion during the ancient war 10,000 years ago. In order to use this ultimate move, the four dragon aspects were tricked by Nethario, who was also a dragon aspect back then. They poured most of their power and more than a third of their souls into it. As for the exact number, no one knew. It could only be deduced from a few words, but it should be a lot. If it were a human, it would be so much that they would not be able to walk steadily. In the worst-case scenario, there would be the Time King Nosdormu's power of time, the Magic King Maligo's power of magic, the Life Queen Alexstrasza's power of life, and the Dream King Isera's secret dream technique. There were 4 supreme powers, and even grasping a tiny bit of any one of them was enough to make any mortal's expression change, let alone all 4 of them at the same time. As long as Necros was a little more powerful, even Anastrian and Antonidas, the 2 breaking dawns, would have to kneel, let alone radiant moon mages. Under normal circumstances, if Duque encountered Necros, he would definitely be dead. But Duque was calm. His next words took a turn. "I'm in a hurry. Can you please die?" Duque was very honest. He told him his reason: he was in a hurry. Duque was very polite and said, "Please." Duque was very annoyed, because the goal of his request was for Necros to die. Then die first. Necros suddenly waved a skull staff that still had faint traces of blood on it, and the space around them trembled. Duque's eyes suddenly narrowed. He looked at the evil staff that was obviously made from the skull of a human mage. Duque suddenly did not want to speak. Neither of them spoke again, but the aftermath of their magic power suddenly collided in the darkness, causing the surrounding ground to be filled with sand and gravel. With the 2 of them as the center, a storm surged in all directions. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. His surroundings were pitch black, and he was also in a huge semi-enclosed space. It was obviously impossible for outsiders to spy on this place, but the battle here seemed to be the focus of all the eyes in the world. In front of the huge iron gate, Orgrim was charging at the seemingly weak line of defense of Gavin Rad and the others. Not good. Necros was going all out. "Let's kill them all." That's right. Orgrim panicked. The Red Dragon Army was the tribe's last trump card. They could not afford to lose it. However, if it were any other lineup, it would be impossible for them to resist the attack of him and the tribal chiefs. This lineup was really not bad. After Gavin Rad obtained the power of lightning, his short-term combat ability was already on par with the strongest Holy Knight, Uther. If both sides were to duel and the time limit was 10 minutes, it would definitely be a draw. Of course, if it was overtime, Uther, who had the purer power of Holy Light and could wear down the opponent, would win. Orgrim picked up the Hammer of Destruction, which was connected to his mind, but he still could not defeat Gavin Rad. Most of the other tribal chiefs encountered the same problem. Originally, Kilrog had the chance to heavily injure Abendis, but because of Sasha's arrows, he failed several times. And the duel inside was at its peak right from the start. Necros wanted to kill Duque in an instant. He had to do this. Demon's Soul had never been a godly item that could be connected to its master's mind. Under the modification of the Wings of Death, it had long become the most powerful magic item. The price for such boundless power was vitality. Even though Necros was a beast man with strong vitality, even though he would kill disobedient red dragons and sacrifice them to Demon's Soul, for a terrifying magic item that could wipe out the entire Burning Legion expedition back then, this little bit of vitality was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Terrifying flames suddenly exploded, and the dark space became as bright as day. It felt like the darkest hell was suddenly surrounded by hundreds of suns. No. It was not just an encirclement. It was like a comet crashing into the ground at high speed. Even Duque himself did not think that he had any hope of surviving. Even Sasha, who was far away from the iron gate, could feel the monstrous heat coming from behind her. That was super high temperature that could even melt steel in an instant. Sasha's face suddenly turned as white as her beautiful silver hair. No, Duque. Everyone on the Alliance's side was so scared that their faces turned pale. Everyone on the Horde's side looked ecstatic. Necros is actually this strong? Orgrim laughed loudly, trying to use the common language to break Gavin Rad's will. Duque is definitely going to die. Bullsh *T. Duque has never lost to you. Gavinrad retorted stubbornly, but it made Orgrim feel terrible. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be dead. But Duque. Ugh, Orgrim's heart skipped a beat. Inside, in the huge empty space, facing the countless fireballs that were the size of small houses, Duque let out a soft sigh. He raised his hand and cast Arcane Impact. Could a simple mid-level spell break through so many fireballs? The answer was, unless there was a miracle, but a miracle happened. The terrifying magic power that seemed to be able to destroy a kingdom's capital couldn't tear through that small ball of purplish-blue arcane energy. How is this possible? Nekros shouted in shock. Almost instantly, the fireballs in front of him exploded like balloons that had been pierced by needles. It wasn't just the fireballs. Even the magic shield that he had sacrificed countless void devils in exchange for crumbled under Duke's arcane impact, like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Then, Nekros watched helplessly as the magic he had shot out with the power of Demon's Soul at the critical moment suddenly distorted and dissipated under the impact of the seemingly ordinary magic power. Not only that, but even the condensed magic power in his body suddenly disappeared. Bam! Arcane Impact wasn't a terrifying fire-type spell. After being hit directly, Nekros didn't immediately turn into charcoal, but he was still sent flying. Blood spurted out of his mouth in midair before he finally fell limply onto the cold, rough ground with a thud. All the ribs in his chest must have been broken. No, how can? Nekros' eyes widened. Chapter 5:14. Nekros could no longer stand up. His eyes were still filled with endless horror and disbelief. He had never thought that as a high-grade warlock with the demon's soul in his hands, he would be killed in seconds one day. After spitting out his last 3 words, Nekros died. No orc could survive such an injury, unless there was a high-grade shaman next to him. Nekros used to be a shaman, but after using the demon's soul, he became a warlock through and through. He might have countless life-saving skills, but unfortunately, under Duque's surprise attack, he couldn't use any of them. Blood flowed out of Nekros' limp body and melted in the darkness. At this time, he saw the system prompt from the wings of death: attack the wielder of the demon's soul, my power will protect you. The corners of Duque's mouth curled up into a smug smile. Duque's voice sounded faintly, F***CK, would there be a backdoor for a magic artifact that Nazario made himself? Back then, Nazario had tricked the 4 dragon aspects. As cunning as he was, he definitely wouldn't put himself in danger. Hence, the demon's soul could seriously affect the other 4 dragon aspects, but it definitely wouldn't affect the black dragon bloodline. Nazario had said that his power was protecting Duque, but to put it bluntly, the pendant contained his scales. Any power that came from the demon's soul would be rendered useless when it came into contact with the power in his scales. This feeling was like a college entrance examination in India. The examinees were taking the exam inside, and a large group of parents crawled outside the exam building to pass their children a cheat sheet. Well, the invigilator even treated the parents who were blocking the light outside the window as air. Thinking of this, even Duque, who had a vested interest in this, had a few words in his mind: legal cheating. An official hack. Do you understand? Just like that, the orc warlock Nekros, who was clearly stronger, was killed by Duque in a second. At this moment, Nekros' death directly alarmed everyone outside the Iron Gate. Everyone could see that the complicated incantations that were originally climbing like vines outside the Iron Gate receded like the tide. Once upon a time, this place was an absolute forbidden area for the beastmen. Even if the great chieftain Orgrim wanted to come, he would need Nekros to lead the way. Otherwise, even his powerful fire resistance wouldn't be able to save him. Now, even a fool would know that something had happened to Nekros. Otherwise, such a change wouldn't have occurred. Long live Duque. Even though there were only 7 or 8 people left, the alliance suddenly burst into thunderous cheers. Hiss. At this moment, all the beastmen in the surroundings couldn't help but gasp, and their rugged and ruthless faces revealed horrified expressions. How long had it been since Duque and the female elven mage entered? Such a short time was only enough for them to reach Necros. After all, it took Necros 3 months to build this place into an impenetrable fortress. Orgrim clearly remembered his assistant, Zulu Cid, telling him that even Ghoul Dan at his peak would have to kneel, let alone the weak mages of the Alliance. Necros was the demon god here. What kind of joke was this? What kind of trash demon god was this? He was actually killed in one move. Was Necros bluffing? No. Impossible. This wasn't the first time that Necros had personally killed disobedient young red dragons here. Then, did this mean that Duque was too strong? What kind of terrifying efficiency was this? What kind of terrifying power was this? It wasn't just the beast men who were enemies. All the human knights guarding the Iron Gate were also extremely shocked. Forcing Orgrim away with a powerful lightning hammer, Gavinrad raised his hammer high and laughed loudly. Do you see this? Damned greenskins. This is the power of the greatest hero in the history of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. Just as the morale of the horde began to drop, Orgrim laughed out loud as well. Foolish humans. You don't even know what's controlling the Red Dragon Queen? That thing is called the demon's soul. Only warlocks who can control the power of demons can use it. As a mage, Duque can't use it at all. Ha 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 ha. Without the order to remove the restraints, the Red Dragon Queen will never be freed. Of course, you can also try to kill that humanoid female lizard and then taste the anger of the entire Red Dragon army. Thousands of elites had died, and more than 10,000 had died in the rear. So much manpower and resources had been wasted, and in the end, it was all for nothing. This time, it was the Alliance's turn to be at a loss. Several people were instantly stunned, and some were even almost killed by the enemy. Suddenly, Sasha's voice sounded. Don't believe him. If he could solve it directly, Duque could have done it in 2 days. He delayed for so many days, and only yesterday did he personally tell me that all the cards are finally gathered. Finally gathered? If it were anyone else, no one would have believed such words. But the person who spoke was Duque, the most outstanding strategist in the entire Alliance, a wise man who liked to plan before taking action. If he dared to say such words, then it must be true. Orgrim looked at the battlefield in disbelief. He looked at the powerhouses of the Alliance who were at a great disadvantage but had high morale. The chief's expression was indescribable. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and his fangs seemed to be chattering. His eyes were filled with disbelief, as if he was in a dream. How could one person's prestige reach such a level? Orgrim had longed for this for a long time, but had never been able to reach it. Yet, his old enemy had reached it. It had to be said that it was ironic. Kill them. We still have a chance. Orgrim roared. Just then, a shining golden Gundam, oh, no, a paladin suddenly smashed through the ceiling and descended from the sky. When he landed, the hard tiles around him cracked inch by inch. Sand and pebbles flew everywhere, and it was a mess. Go. Ask me first, Wother. The Alliance's strongest paladin had arrived. On the other side, Duque quickly ran over and searched Necro's corpse. It didn't take him much effort to find a platinum-colored disc hanging from the Beastman Warlock's waist. System notification: you have found the God-tier magic device Demon's Soul. Almost as soon as Duque's finger touched Demon's Soul, the image around him suddenly became clear. It was as if an invisible hand had lifted the black cover covering the entire room, revealing the situation inside the huge cave. This was a huge cave that could fit at least 2 Boeing 777 airliners. Duque didn't expect the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza to be less than 30 feet away from him. Chapter 5:15. This wasn't the first time Duque and the Red Dragon Queen had met. They had met once before after the Battle of Karazhan. At that time, Duque was completely focused on the death of Medivh and didn't have the time to carefully examine this legendary dragon queen who had existed throughout almost all of Azeroth's history. Even though Duque had seen Alexstrasza in the game, his impression of the queen's human form was still very vague. Duque suddenly found that he couldn't take it anymore. The person in front of him was so sexy that it was against the rules. In his field of view, Alexstrasza was chained to the ground by a small iron chain. Her feet were facing Duque, and her body was facing inward. From this angle, the first thing he saw was a pair of long legs that were different from the slender and long legs of the elves. They were full of strength and beauty. They were the same long legs that gave people the feeling that they wouldn't break no matter how much they played with them. Further in, because of the angle of view and the fact that the queen was only wearing a pantsuit, the view was dominated by her perky buttocks. The smooth and large curve formed a perfect arc. It was snow-white and full, and at first glance, one could feel that it was full of firm elasticity. The queen's right hand was on the ground, and her left hand was behind her waist. She was half-bent, inadvertently forming a standard S shape. From this angle, as the line of sight moved, one could immediately see the eye-catching and proud peaks on the buttocks. The towering peaks were like climbing a towering mountain, and then immediately had to look up at an even higher peak. The firm and proud peaks, matched with the red and gold-rimmed breastplate, looked even more sexy and charming, like a red lotus in full bloom. Looking at it again, it was an angry oval face full of a strong exotic style. It was clearly a standard female elf face template, but the noble aura that was still revealed even under torture and defilement made it even more indescribably sexy. However, in her proud figure, there were a few criminal accessories. On her jade-like feet, there was a shiny black iron shackle around her ankles, and there was an evil metal collar around her slender neck. A long iron chain hung down from her neck, passing between her breasts and reaching the ground. This was basically hinting to Duque that if he really wanted to do something to the queen, Alexstrasza would definitely be unable to resist. Is this the so-called queen's temptation? Humph. How could I, Duque, be such a shameless person? What locked room play? What bondage training play? I won't do something so shameless. I am the righteous and reliable Lang Jun, the Duque with the highest moral integrity in the world. Ha ha ha. Facing the queen who was looking back at him, Duque revealed a lecherous smile. If there were no mistakes, the moral integrity inherited from Medivh would be added to his body in 21 seconds. Hypocrisy would activate. His smile would also instantly rise from the level of a pervert to the level of a saint. Yes, the plan worked. However, a gust of cold wind blew over, and with a whoosh, nothing happened. Something seemed to be wrong. The lecher was still the same lecher. Something didn't seem right. Duque quickly asked the system elf in his mind, Hey. Where did my integrity go? Hurry. Waiting online. Integrity? Host, do you have such a thing? The system elf replied seriously. If its voice wasn't so rigid, perhaps it wouldn't have such a fatal effect. But it was precisely this sort of tone that seemed to be speaking nonsense in a serious manner that caused Duke's chest to feel as if it was split open by something. Moral integrity was like a ball. Throw it out, pick it back up. Throw it out, pick it back up. Throw it out, wait, do I have such a thing as integrity? Damn it. This joke isn't funny at all. Duque angrily flipped the table in his mind. I'm talking about human nature. The human nature that Medivh gave me. The system elf immediately came to a realization, that. It's long gone. You've been cursed for 15 days, and you're losing your humanity, integrity, every day. In addition, you've just used the soul-corroding power of the wings of death. The humanity, integrity, that you inherited from Medivh has been completely lost. Right now, your soul power is 100, and your humanity happens to be 100%. Pfft. In the mind world, Duque vomited 300 liters of blood. Alright, life is like a drama. If you don't have integrity, acting skills will save you. Watch how I, the best actor, Duque, reversed the situation. Duque's face almost changed as he put away the frivolous smile on his lips. When he focused his attention on the pair of inhuman red horns on Alexstrasza's head, he kept saying to himself, "She's not human. She's not human. Her horns are so cute. Pft, pft, pft. What am I thinking?" However, just as Duque was about to say something, the Red Dragon Queen spoke first. Her voice revealed a clear sense of grievance, and it sounded like she was scolding, "Duque, why are you only here now?" The slightly magnetic voice had the typical style of a queen, but it also sounded like a lover coquettishly saying, "Damn you, why are you only here now?" Duque swallowed his saliva, and then instinctively felt that something was wrong. Suddenly, the voice of Deathwing sounded in Duque's ears. "What are you hesitating for? Recite the spell I taught you and liberate Her Majesty the Red Dragon Queen." At the same time, a sentence emerged in Duque's mind. It was not Nesario's voice, but Duque's own voice. "What are you thinking about? Recite the spell, so that Alexstrasza will become your slave forever. You can have the most beautiful queen in the world and control eternal life. You can also command the entire Red Dragon army, sweep the world, and be crowned king." The Red Dragon Queen in front of him had a coquettish expression on her face. She was more charming than all the female protagonists in all the romance movies that Duque had watched on his computer before he transmigrated. Alexstrasza did not know what happened to Duque at first. She was overjoyed when she saw that Necros, who should have died 1,000,000 times, was killed by Duque in one move. "Oh Titan! You're the one who saved me. Thank you. Duque, hurry up and untie me. I don't want to stay in this damn place for one more second." Duque was unexpectedly silent, revealing a perverted look. But the queen did not care. "Quick! Quick! Quick! My compatriots and I are absolutely happy to roast every living orc in the world with our dragon breath. Do you want any more rewards? Don't worry, I've saved so many treasures from ancient times until today that you can't even imagine them. Alright, since you saved me, I can share some with you," Alexstrasza said with a pained expression. Something unexpected happened again. Like a pervert, Duque pounced on her directly. Then, just as his hands were about to touch the queen's pair of giant cats, he suddenly pulled out Demon's Soul with his right hand and took out a strange accessory with his left hand, wanting to smash it on Demon's Soul. At the same moment, a cold male figure suddenly appeared behind Duque. Chapter 5:16. Cunning brat, do you think you can fool me? Accompanied by the casual and contemptuous words, this ghost-like black-haired man waved his hand lightly, and Duque died. It was not that Duque did not try to resist. Unfortunately, the light of his resistance was so dim, as laughable as a firefly trying to compete with the sun. Ice Barrier was activated at the very end. He was just an inch away from turning Duque into ashes with the black flames he had casually waved out. However, the powerful defense constructed by the ice elements still protected Duque for more than a second. Just like in the future, the invincibility of a paladin and the ice barrier of a mage could be dispelled. In the face of a higher and more condensed power, the so-called absolute defense was just a joke. How could a mere morning star mage like Duque be able to resist the power of the Deathwing, Nesario, who was at the peak of power in the world of Azeroth? Duque was dead. He was killed in an instant without any suspense. Right in front of Alexstrasza. The poor Red Dragon Queen had just thought that she could regain her freedom. She did not expect to see the dawn of hope, only to find that it was just a prelude to a darker nightmare. Nah. Saw. Oh. Alexstrasza was furious. She was really angry. With incomparable grief and indignation, and with the grievances she had suffered for months, she roared angrily at Nesario. However, it was of no use. Necro's death only meant that the demon's soul had temporarily lost its master. This did not mean that the shackles on her had been lifted. She could only look up at the high and mighty Nesario pitifully and desperately like a weak woman who could be ravaged 10,000 times at any time. Nesario, no, he should now be called Deathwing, appeared in human form. His entire face was still shrouded in a gloomy black fog. The only thing that could be seen was his pair of eyes that were full of contempt. Hee. Well, I really didn't expect that you, who are known as the most beautiful in the dragon realm, would actually fall to such a state. You've really opened my eyes, Alexstrasza. Nesario. The queen gritted her teeth. Don't call me that name. With a light shout, a strong wind was stirred up in the huge cave. The queen's long, fiery red hair was blown straight by the strong wind. After the rage, Deathwing's voice became gentle again. He stretched out his left hand with sharp nails, grabbed the queen's chin, and twisted her up. Spit. The queen directly spat a mouthful of fragrant foam towards Deathwing. However, that mouthful of saliva suddenly stopped in midair, and in the next instant, it vanished without a trace. Originally I wanted to send this filthy thing back to your face, but that would be a blasphemy to all dragons. So thank me, dear Alexstrasza. The black dragon king's sharp claws rubbed against the queen's delicate face, easily scraping out bloody scars. The queen's face was disfigured, but she instantly healed the scars. As the life-giver, as long as her power was not completely exhausted, her regenerative abilities were almost limitless. But, the red dragon queen was trembling violently. Are you touched? I'm not interested in you. As long as I get what I want, it doesn't matter if you become a lowly orc slave or a despicable human plaything. He. Shaking Alexstrasza off, Nesario walked towards the back. There were a few huge dragon eggs that were blooming with a crimson glow. However, the power of the flames wrapped around the dragon eggs had almost been extinguished. The light was like a candle that was about to go out, and could no longer protect these dragon eggs. Bang! Nesario waved his hand, and suddenly, the last protection on the dragon eggs shattered. At this moment, she understood everything. Why did the demon's soul, which had been missing for nearly 10,000 years, suddenly appear? Why did this terrifying magic artifact that specialized in restraining dragons suddenly fall into the hands of the orcs? Why did the orcs find her so perfectly and inexplicably capture her? Why did the orcs so cleverly use all kinds of mental and physical torture to reduce her resistance and make more red dragons obey the tribe's orders? Then, why did Duque come to rescue her? There was an answer to all of these questions. Only the dragon aspect understood the dragon aspect the best. From the beginning to the end, it was all Nesario's plot. And his ultimate goal was her dragon eggs. Nesario probably wanted to use her dragon eggs to hatch the most evil and incredible new type of evil dragon that obeyed his orders. Alexstrasza shouted in despair, "No, don't touch them." Nesario did not stop. He sneered as he continued his movements. The queen was in despair. She was choking. Tears of sadness welled up in her eyes. Who will save me? Save my child that might be born. I'm willing to give up everything for this. It was as if the heavens had heard her prayers in the darkest of despair. A miracle had really happened. Right in front of Nesario, an emerald green light suddenly bloomed. Was that a portal? The next moment, Deathwing's movements suddenly became sluggish, as if his entire body had been forcibly pulled into slow motion. Following that, a blue radiance shot out from the green portal and sent Deathwing flying. Boom! The surging magic power directly blasted him to the top of the cave. It turned his entire body into a cannonball, piercing through the underground rock stratum of the entire grim battle fortress and blasting into the sky. 3 unfamiliar yet familiar figures appeared beside Alexstrasza. Although her eyes were covered by tears, she could not recognize these people for a moment. This did not hinder her from sensing who they were by their aura. Isra? Nosdorm? Maligos. Isra smiled and nodded, then sighed. Sorry, we can't touch that thing either. It's more important to deal with Nesario now. That's right, the dragon aspect had shot themselves in the foot. Back then, there were not many intelligent life forms on planet Azeroth other than the dragon race. Therefore, after they realized that they could not destroy the demon soul, they set up a spell that no dragon or dragon descendant could use. Now, they could only watch helplessly as the thing was placed in front of them, but the 3 dragon aspects could not do anything about it. They could not even save their companions. This was definitely ironic. After saying that, the 3 human-like fellows nodded at the same time and disappeared in an instant. In the next second, the terrifying roars of 4 dragon aspects rang out in the sky. A 3v1 dragon aspect battle had begun. Chapter 5:17. The pitiful red dragon queen could only wait for the next person who was qualified to use Demon's soul to judge her fate. Silence. Dead silence. The queen's chest rose and fell with rapid breathing. As expected, did I still have too much hope? Alright, I shouldn't have asked too much of Duque. Who's next? No matter who it is, as long as they can truly free me, I swear I'll treat them well. Abandon the high and mighty dignity of the dragon race. Treat them well. Alexstrasza's mind was in a mess. Her fate was in someone else's hands. It didn't feel good to be hovering between hope and despair, heaven and hell. But she had to wait. She didn't expect to see Marion Firewing, a high-ranking elven magician. Marion walked in as cleanly and elegantly as if she was taking a stroll in her own garden. I am the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Quick. Release me, save me. Like a drowning person who couldn't swim, the Queen instinctively asked for help when she saw the emblem of the Alliance and the Silver Moon Council on Marion's chest. For thousands of years, the Red Dragon Army had a good relationship with the Silver Moon Council. At this moment, Marion smiled. It was a proud smile, with an unbridled feeling that was infinitely close to madness. The female elf who was smiling like a flower gave the Queen a terrible ominous feeling. Save you? Who said I'm going to save you? Marion asked with an extremely cold smile, pushing the Queen's heart into a bottomless abyss again. She had already fallen into the 18th level of hell. Who would have thought that there was another one at the bottom? 36 levels of hell? Are you afraid? The Red Dragon Queen's voluptuous body trembled. In the eyes of men, this might be an original sin of temptation. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the same sex, this was a sin. In Marion's eyes, there was clear jealousy. Dragons are so good. Eternal life in the true sense, eternal beauty, eternal youth. Back then, the eternal life of my night elf compatriots was also bestowed by you, wasn't it? Your Majesty, the giver of life. She seemed to be murmuring to herself, but it made the Queen's heart colder. Who are you? Who are you loyal to? Whoosh, it really is, Demon's soul. Marion walked to the place where Duque had died and picked up the platinum disc. Remember your new master's name. Mother Dragon. My name is Marion Firewing. Ha ha ha. Alexstrasza's beautiful face was flushed with anger, but before she had time to feel sad, she began to feel the soul torture from the demon's soul. The pain of having his heart pierced by countless needles was something he was unable to adapt to. You're a warlock. You're one of Nesario's men. Not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry could use the demon's soul. Only warlocks could operate this terrifying demonic artifact. In less than a second, Marion could clearly feel her life force fading away. With a wave of her hand, a mirror made of ice appeared beside her. Marion could clearly see the wrinkles that appeared on her face. Anger flashed across her face, and she immediately laughed. That orc warlock is really an idiot. He actually put his own life force into it. If he knew that you created the world tree. Ha 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 ha. The Queen's expression was terrible. The high elves were not outsiders like the orcs. They were not so easy to fool. However, as a queen, she instinctively refused to be dominated by Marion. Alexstrasza gritted her teeth. You actually want to be my master? Haha. Do you think Nesario will let you go? Nesario? Ha ha ha. Although he disguised himself well, the long years had made him forget one thing. The dragon's soul itself was designed with the 5 dragon aspects as the standard. Marion softly chanted an incantation, and the platinum-colored disc immediately changed. The disc was divided into 5 equal regions, 4 of which were radiating with a bright radiance. The queen immediately realized what Marion wanted to do. Wahahaha. Yes. As long as I put the scale that contains Nesario's soul and power into the demon's soul, even the famous Deathwing will become my slave. When that happens, the 5-colored dragons will crawl at my feet. I will no longer be a mere Silvermoon counselor, I will be the queen of the entire world of Azeroth. Ha 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 ha, Marion laughed wildly. Her laughter was so crazy and unrestrained that it drained the blood from Alexstrasza's face. Everything was clear. Whether it was her capture or the Red Dragon Legion being controlled, most of it was a conspiracy of Deathwing. However, as Deathwing's backup, as the one who was truly trusted by Deathwing, and as the agent to control the other 4-colored dragons, Marion had chosen to betray Deathwing for some reason. In any case, the artifact, Dragon's Soul, which the dragon aspects had created to repel the Burning Legion, had really shot themselves in the foot this time. The queen was not optimistic about Marion controlling Nesario through the demon's soul. Because it depended on how much of Nesario's soul she got. If it was less than 10%, the evil Black Dragon King would probably kill Marion even if it meant the soul backlash. Once 1/3 of the soul was injected like the 4 dragon aspects, control would be inevitable. And it would involve the entire race. At this moment, Marion was suddenly attacked without a sound. Break. 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 4 emerald green arrows suddenly appeared in the air less than a palm away from Marion. Unfortunately, that was the end. The arrowheads were stuck in the air by some mysterious force, unable to move an inch. It was only then that an oval magic shield wrapped around Marion appeared in everyone's field of vision. Oh. Marion slowly turned around and looked at the female ranger behind her with a bow. It's you? Windsor Windrunner. It was Windsor. Realizing that something was wrong, she left the front line to Gavin Rad and the others and followed them like crazy. Let me ask you. Where is Dooku in? The usually beautiful and quiet Windsor now had unconcealable anger and excitement. Even her arms, which should not have trembled, were obviously shaking. Marion smiled wickedly. He's dead. The person who killed him was Deathwing. After saying that, she pointed at the Grand Marshal's combat staff, on the ground that was blackened by the flames. When Windsor came in, it was not that she did not see the blackened head of the staff, but when she suddenly heard the news and saw Alexstrasza's depressed expression, Windsor suddenly felt dizzy. No. Chapter 518. The Grand Marshal's staff wasn't an ornament from a noble's house. It represented the Dalajan's highest magical achievement. Sasha clearly remembered that even if she shot an arrow, the staff's magic power would deflect it. But now, it lay quietly on the ground. There was a deathly still scorch on the ground with the point of impact as the center. It wasn't an ordinary fire, but a terrifying flame that could burn everything. Even the rock stratum itself was destroyed. The magic surrounding the burn marks was so dense that it couldn't be fooled. Sasha felt like she was about to collapse. She suddenly recalled all the time she'd spent with Duque. The miraculous things he'd done after appearing as her future brother-in-law, turning trash into treasure, modifying the storm altar, repelling an army with a single banner, saving Lordaeron City from a desperate crisis, and saving the Red Dragon Queen despite being cursed with death. Of course, what touched Sasha the most was that he'd saved her from the terrifying dragon breath. Nothing was more touching than a man who could be relied on at the most crucial moment. Just as she thought she could understand this future brother-in-law, He'd been captured by the wings of death. They'd finally reunited, and they hadn't even exchanged a few words. Who knew it would be an eternal farewell? I want you to be roasted in the flames of hell for 10,000 years. With a furious roar, Sasha disappeared from where she stood. In the next second, in the huge, pitch-black cave, sharp arrows were suddenly shot at them from all directions. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. There was a continuous stream of steel arrows. There was a silent elven wooden arrow. There was also the nimble power of wind. However, everything was resolved by the pair of gigantic flaming wings behind Marion. The wings were over 2 meters long. It was as if they had a life of their own. With a light flick, at least 3 arrows would be reduced to ashes. Ha ha ha. Too weak. You're really too weak. With your strength, you can't even make me move half a step. And you want to kill me? Ha ha ha. With her left hand on her waist and the platinum disc in her hand, Marion placed her right elbow on the back of her left hand and propped up her chin. Marion gazed at the darkness with a devilish gaze, as though Sasha was right in front of her. Humph. Gritting her teeth, Sasha activated aimed shot. Aimed shot was the ranger's most powerful skill. Corresponding to its power, it was an ultimate skill that needed to be charged up. In a battle like this, exposing one's position was definitely disadvantageous for a ranger. The explosive power of a high-ranked mage was far greater than that of a ranger. What Sasha was betting on was Marion's arrogance. Even though she did not want to say it out loud, she had to admit that the difference in strength between the two of them was too great. If Aurelia was here, she might be able to suppress Marion. However, Sasha, whose damage had not been polarized, could not think of any other skills other than aimed shooting that could blast through the protection of that pair of strange flame wings. Sasha knew that Marion was trying to destroy her ultimate move and deal her a heavy blow, but when she thought of Duque, who had turned into ashes, her tears flowed uncontrollably. Duque. Bless me to kill him, hee. She still did not move. Marion looked down at the arrow that had gathered all of Sasha's power as it shot towards her, as if she was looking at an ant. And then, there was no then. The raging flames easily burned the entire arrow. Let's end this. Marion raised her left hand lightly, her index finger forming an elegant arc with her arm. Even this light finger of hers was bewitching. A huge fireball instantly formed at her fingertip. In the next second, the huge fireball would shoot out and blast Sasha into ashes. Just at this moment, Marion suddenly felt the sound of wind behind her head. Who? Alexstrasza? Turning around, she saw the dumbfounded queen. It was obvious that the queen was looking in the direction of, behind me? Instinctively, Marion activated the power of Demon's Soul. Unfortunately, she had made the same mistake as a certain stupid orc warlock. The surging evil flames were easily popped like soap bubbles. A brick made of ice appeared out of thin air. It was grabbed by a swinging arm and slammed down like lightning. Marion's own magic shield took effect. The moment it took effect, an arcane energy that wasn't very strong, but was sharp as a needle, easily pierced through her shield. In the end. Pa! Fresh blood dripped down from her forehead, quickly staining Marion's bewitching face. Hee. No matter how strong Pharaoh is, he'll be knocked down in one move. Marion fainted with a brick while humming something that others couldn't understand. Who was that guy? Naturally, it was our Duque. That signature evil smirk, that face that deserved a beating after succeeding in his scheme, Sasha would be able to recognize him even if he turned into ashes. Duque? Duque? The first voice was the Queen's, and the second was naturally Sasha's. Yes. Duque replied to Sasha with a smile as he dealt with Marion. It's not auspicious to kill a sister. Therefore, Duque fitted Marion with the spellbreaker shackles that he got from Kuel Salus. This thing was mainly used to destroy the circulation of magic power in the magic circuits of the human body. For a regular person, this thing was no different from regular shackles. For a mage, it was enough to turn a high-level mage into a weak girl who couldn't even truss a chicken. As a gentleman, he would be letting himself down if he didn't use tortoise shackles. But with two important ladies present, Duque just cuffed Marian's joints behind her back. Duque? Sasha even dropped her bow and walked over in disbelief. Yes, what's wrong? Duque? Sasha's tone became even more intense. Duque blinked. Didn't your sister tell you that I know true mirror image? Duque continued to spout nonsense. Mirror image my ass. He really couldn't take it anymore and was instantly killed by the wings of death. Looking at the system notification that he had 90% soul power and 90% moral integrity, Duque was crying in his heart. But to prevent Sasha from worrying, he could only continue to pretend to be strong. Duque? Is it really you? Looking at Sasha, whose eyes were blurry and glistened with tears, Duque knew that things weren't so simple. Duque sighed. It's really me. If you don't believe me, come and touch me. Duque, from shock to surprise, and then to ecstasy, when all the grievances and fear in her heart poured out, Sasha finally did something that not only Duque didn't expect, but she also didn't expect. Sasha pounced on Duque and pushed him to the ground. Then, she closed her eyes and kissed him deeply. Chapter 5:19. There was something in this world called taboo. As an old fool on Mount Akina, it was Duque's dream to have the legendary sisters. But on the other hand, as a young man of the new era, Duque had told himself countless times to just wash up and sleep. At first, Duque didn't have any special feelings for Sasha. At most, he felt that the three Windrunner sisters were very pretty. Life was always full of surprises. Saving someone had accidentally opened up Sasha's heart. There were some things that happened naturally, like water flowing into a canal, Being kissed by a beauty that he liked was a blissful thing. Now that he had lost his moral integrity, he couldn't count on Duque to become a saint. Duque's eyes widened. He was stunned for less than half a second before he shamefully obeyed. The boss of the Jiangnan tannery ran away with his sister-in-law. Then cough. One of Duke's stiff arms gently went through the silver hair and held onto the back of Sasha's head, while the other wrapped around her waist that had been through a lot of training. In that instant, Duke clearly felt Sasha's body stiffen for a moment. Then, not only from her face, but also from her breasts, waist, and thighs that were pressed close to him. He could clearly feel the heat rising. But the kiss didn't stop. A smooth, fragrant tongue came over and tangled with a certain someone's tongue. Their heavy breaths intersected, accompanied by soft murmurs. Things seemed to be progressing in a wonderful direction at a high speed. Unfortunately, before their passion was fully ignited, it was interrupted. It was the roar of an ancient dragon guardian. Damn it. You two are purposely making me angry, aren't you? Definitely on purpose, right? Duque, are you going to let me out or not? I'll count to 3. If you don't let me out, I'll go crazy. The passionate kiss stopped, and their lips parted. Looking at the silver line connecting their lips, Sasha suddenly blushed. The next second, she bounced up as if she had been electrocuted. She sat on Duque's lap, not knowing what to do. Duque was annoyed. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm done counting. Why don't you go crazy? In the face of Duque's fierce gaze, Alexstrasza actually cowered. All right, just say it. Are you here to save me or not? Or are you going to learn from those two shameless fellows and enslave me, making me do all kinds of strange things? Something strange? Duque blinked. You mean what you did with this silver-haired elf? The queen covered her chest with her hands, which was a rare sight. Pfft. Duque choked. Damn you. I'm not interested in you, okay? If you care so much, why are you wearing a bikini armor? You might as well wrap yourself up into a seed. Why do you need to transform into a human form? There were so many things to complain about. Duque was so angry that he didn't want to scold her anymore. Sasha was so embarrassed that she wanted to die. In his excitement, he had forgotten about the presence of the Red Dragon Queen. Now that he thought about it, he just wanted to find a place to hide and not see what was happening outside. Duke's forehead was full of black lines, and he held his forehead. All right, if it's to save you, I will save you. Let me ask you something. Have you developed any thoughts of revenge against society or going against humanity because of the long period of torture? The queen raised the shackles on her hands. If you don't unchain me, I'll really get angry. Then what do I get out of saving you? You do. If you delay any longer and something happens to my siblings, there won't be any. Sasha gaped as she watched Duque haggle with the famous ancient dragon like a peddler. She couldn't connect Duque to that great hero of the Alliance at all. Actually, it wasn't Duque's fault. Because of the curse, the integrity he had inherited from Medivh was gone. Now, Duque had become that unprincipled, animal-like transmigrator again. All right, one last request. I'll say it through the mental connection. Duque gently pointed his finger between the queen's brows. Then, the two of them quickly exchanged their conditions and opinions. This wasn't a problem at first. However, Duque underestimated Alexstrasza, who was one of the top figures in this world. Even though it was a superficial exchange of consciousness, the queen still secretly peeked at a part of Duque's memory Duque didn't know. The mental barrier he had created with the system was still trying to resist Nesario's mental corruption. All right, it's time to end this. Duque picked up Demon's soul. At this moment, Sasha picked up her bow again. She stared at the unconscious Marion and spread her senses. On the other side, the queen was also watching Duque nervously. She had had enough of the torture. Her little heart had long been broken and mended, and she really couldn't take any more fright. Because of the chains, she had to kneel on the ground like a pilgrim worshipping. She looked up at Duque and stared at Duque's every move. Cautiously, Duque took out the accessory that Nesario had given him. A wave of arcane energy gathered in his hand. With a crisp bang, the glass used as a disguise shattered and dissipated, revealing the real thing inside. It was a scale in the shape of a water droplet, with a fiery and evil aura. There seemed to be a small black dragon roaring angrily on the scale, as if blaming Duque for not acting according to his evil script. Looking at the platinum-colored disc, Duque used the black scale to draw a huge arc on the surface of the demonic creature. The scales of the wings of death were like a knife cutting through butter, easily cutting through the hard golden surface of the demon's soul. 1 area, 2 areas, 3 areas, 4 areas. When the 4 glowing areas were all cut open, Xian's eyes lit up. Windsor let out a scream. Be careful. She pulled Duque away in time, only to see that demon's soul was already floating in the air, and the long arc-shaped incision began to violently spew out a strong light with 4 colors: green, representing the emerald dream; red, representing the life giver; bronze, representing the controller of time; and blue, representing the supreme power of magic. Duque could clearly feel the huge amount of energy surging out of the cracked magic artifact. He knew that he had to act quickly, or the energy would dissipate forever and be lost in the wind of grim battle fortress. La Ducasai, he chanted the incantation from the Red Dragon Queen. He used almost all the computing power of the system to constantly adjust the spell. He was fully focused. He didn't want anyone to make a mistake at such a critical moment. This was not only the incantation to liberate the Red Dragon Queen, but it was also one of the most important factors in the entire course of history. The 4 colors began to blend together, forming a strange rainbow. It flashed and rose at high speed, passing through the rock formation and flying into the sky. Chapter 520. The bloody battle in front of the huge iron gate had reached its most brutal state. Roars, curses, and the sounds of heavy weapons clashing were the strongest sounds on the battlefield. Due to the aftermath of the intense battle, many of the torches' bases had been destroyed. The light in the tunnel gradually dimmed, and the torches that had fallen to the ground emitted the last bit of heat before they were extinguished. How long had this bloody battle lasted? How many of these savage green-skinned monsters were there? Where did they come from? What kind of strength did they have? Would Duque, who had entered the Iron Gate, succeed? If they succeeded, how many of the people guarding here would be able to survive? Everything had already become a blur, as the people guarding the Iron Gate were already mentally numb. They instinctively waved the weapons in their hands, inhaling more of the bloody air with every breath they took. With every exhale, they let out the loudest roars they could muster. The chaotic wind in the tunnel blew at Uther's ear-length hair, and his brown hair swept across his cheeks. Unlike the other warriors whose eyes were bloodshot from the fierce battle, his most devout faith made him far more tranquil than the others. Uther's mouth was shouting the most majestic of slogans, but his ears were pricked up. It was as if he was standing and listening to a human epic being recited by a bard. The origins were long and magnificent. It was like a long wind that crossed the barriers of time and space, bringing the ideals of their distant ancestors and their wills to this place. In a daze, Uther saw countless illusory knights appear beside him, fighting side by side with them. Even though their faces were blurry, he could clearly see that they were humans. He suddenly understood who they were. Ancestors, kings, and all the heroic spirits who had fought for humanity. The Morning Star wizard behind Uther, Ronan, was unexpectedly powerful. With the support of an almost limitless amount of magic crystals, his violent arcane magic poured out in torrents in the entire tunnel. Any orc below the level of a chief would be instantly killed if they were hit by his magic. It was a pity that there were just too many orcs. For some reason, Uther thought of 2,800 years ago, when humans had just obtained magic power. A man raised his sword in front of the knights and said, "I swear on this sword that humans will bear the grace of the high elves and establish an eternal covenant. We will wipe out all evil creatures and give civilization and hope to the truly intelligent races. My people, my children, my grandchildren, will pass on my oath until the end of the world." More than 2,800 years ago, the flag of the Arathor Empire was raised on the battlefield of the Arthi Highlands, reflecting the dawn of that day. Humans and high elves joined forces to fight against the green trolls. 2,800 years later, it was as if 3,000 years of history had overlapped. Humans and elves joined hands once again, but this time, their enemies had changed from the green-skinned trolls to the green-skinned orcs. 2,800 years ago, we had Thoradin the Great. Now, where is our new Thoradin the Great? While Wuther was talking to himself, the battle had reached its climax. The number of humans still standing in front of the Iron Gate could be counted on 2 hands. The nameless knights had all died in battle. But in front of them, there was still a sea of orc elites. Suddenly, a strange feeling that shook the entire stronghold surged towards everyone, covering the sky and covering the earth. Roar! From the deepest part of Grim Battle Fortress, a loud and clear roar came from within. It was the roar of a dragon. It was the roar of the life-giver, the red dragon Queen Alexstrasza. The roar was filled with complicated emotions. There were almost all kinds of emotions. Sadness, displeasure, resentment, hatred, but most of all, joy. Joy for freedom. Joy for breaking free from the cage. And anger towards the enemy. An ominous feeling spread through every orc, as if the sky was about to fall on them. Not good. Could it be? Before Orgrim could finish, the huge iron gate suddenly opened. From the dark and deep hole, a magical light suddenly flashed like daylight. Sorry, this is the could it be that you are afraid of. Alexstrasza has been liberated by me. Orcs, your doomsday is here. This was followed by a voice that was familiar and extremely hateful to the horde. Countless magical lights shot out from the inside, passing over the heads of the human knights and holy knights. It was like a waterfall of the Milky Way falling from the heavens, exploding into the orc army. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of explosions, other than the chieftains, there were no longer any orcs alive in the dark army. Even someone like Orgrim, who had amazing magic resistance, could not avoid being sent flying by the violent magic. The power of this magic, Duque? Every knight turned around in surprise. He did not disappoint anyone. Duque's not-so-muscular figure appeared in the middle of the gate. Behind him was a somewhat bashful Sasha. Nodding to everyone, Duque raised his head and shouted, "It's time." Muradin. This was a voice that contained magic. It penetrated the walls and spread far away. Before the orcs could react from the explosion, they suddenly realized that there were many holes on both sides of the huge tunnel. Countless dwarves waved giant axes and war hammers as they came out of the holes that were only half the height of the orcs. They did not care about the consequences and started fighting. Muradin Bronzebeard was the first to attack. He raised his war hammer high, brothers of Bronzebeard, for victory. For the future. For tomorrow. For our descendants, we will no longer live under the shadow of these greenskins. Kill. Kill. The holy knights, who were already exhausted, released their strongest notes since the start of the battle. The already dazzling holy light shone even brighter. They were like small suns that crushed towards the horde. No, impossible. It shouldn't be like this. Orgrim's fangs were as sharp as ever. The hammer of destruction that he wielded was still powerful. He could send more than 10 dwarven warriors flying or even kill them with a single sweep. However, all they could see were orcs struggling in despair. Every orc was worthy of the word valiant. But so what? They lost. This time, he was truly defeated. Rexer could not save the horde. He, Orgrim, could not do it either. Even the Red Dragon army, which they relied on the most when they were reorganizing, would immediately rebel the moment their queen was freed. One could imagine the countless red dragons roaring and twisting their necks to bite the dragon-howling orcs that had been riding on their backs for so long to death. No. Duque. Only you. Duque, you must pay the price. Orgrim used all his strength to leap high into the air and throw his hammer of destruction at Duque. Chapter 521. Oh no. Dodge. Don't dodge. At this moment, two completely different factions appeared among the Holy Knights. Those who were close to Duque all prioritized Duque's safety. No one thought that a mage should fight a warrior head-on. However, Uther shouted that he couldn't dodge. Why? Because in that moment, Duque's figure overlapped with Thoradin the Great in Uther's eyes. Fighting head-on was a man's romance, and also a symbol of courage. If Duque considered himself a mage, then he definitely had a reason to dodge. A single flash would solve all his problems. If Duque wanted to become a true leader, then Duque definitely couldn't dodge Orgrim's attack. If he dodged, then he would lose the reason for everyone to follow him. What would Duque do? The answer was out. Duque pulled Sasha behind him with his left hand to prevent her from being affected by the flames. He then slowly pushed out with his right hand. Even if they weren't mages, the knights who didn't know anything about mystical domains could clearly feel the mana in the air surging. Finally, the blue arcane energy solidified. A terrifying aura surged out from Duke's hand, enough to pierce through the entire underground, and spread out in all directions. The bright blue light collided with the hammer of destruction that Orgrim had thrown out. Uther regretted it the moment they collided. What a loss. No. Duque is going to lose. Right. Duque had only thrown out a ball of arcane energy, but Orgrim had thrown out a real semi-divine weapon. Both of them had great power, and usually, the one without a physical body would be at a disadvantage. However, Duque's use of power was ingenious, and it completely changed Uther's understanding of power. From the start, Duque didn't just use one power. Countless arcane bullets formed a continuous path of light. It looked like a river in the sky, or like a water droplet piercing through a stone that had been accelerated by 1,000,000 or even 10 million times. In terms of pure strength, Duque's attack was not as powerful as Orgrim's. Orgrim's strike was strong enough, but it didn't have any aftershocks. Duque's attack was like the growth of all living things. It had a long source and was unable to shake his opponent in terms of quality, but it wasn't too far off either. Then, he made up for it with quantity. Also, it wasn't just the quantity. The arcane missiles that Duque shot out seemed to have some kind of interval or rhythm. The continuous impact destroyed the power and momentum of the hammer of destruction. Of course, everything happened in an instant. If one didn't have amazing perception, they wouldn't be able to tell that Duque had lost first and then won. Everyone could only see that even Great Chief Orgrim's desperate attack could not shake Duke's terrifying aura that was as if a god of magic had descended from the heavens. The moment the two forces collided, the hammer of destruction couldn't shake Duque's magic power at all. The destructive red flames were forcefully shattered, and the blue arcane energy became the only dominant force on this path and on this bloody battlefield. The dim sky was like a remnant of light and shadow, and it was filled with dense blue cracks from the explosion of the arcane energy. For half a second, the entire hammer of destruction seemed to have stopped time, and it was frozen in midair before flying back. Awesome! Not only the surviving holy knights, but even the dwarven warriors who had just killed their way out all cheered. This wasn't the end. Duque suddenly placed his left palm on his right arm. The mana output was further increased. In front of everyone's astonished gazes, Duque actually poured out all the mana he could mobilize in his body at once. Boom! The arcane light arrow that had been shot out turned into a huge arcane light pillar. A beam of arcane light blasted over like a comet crashing down, shooting right into the long and wide passageway. In an instant, it set off an extremely terrifying tsunami. The violent arcane energy set off layers of huge waves, and with a shocking momentum, it surged towards the orcs. This arcane energy wasn't fast, but it could clearly be seen that this energy was spreading throughout the entire path at the speed of an arrow. Everything that came into contact with this energy, such as the walls and the ceiling of the cave, all shattered into pieces. This energy was like a black hole that devoured everything, destroying everything it touched. The first to touch this energy was an orc Chiliarch, and his huge and burly body was directly swallowed up. After letting out an extremely painful scream, his entire upper body completely exploded, leaving only two hairy legs that fell to the ground. At first, Muradin wanted to scold Duque for not being kind enough to even attack his dwarven ally, but after seeing it clearly, Muradin laughed. The killing range of this arcane light pillar was surprisingly based on the height of 170 meters above the ground. Unless the dwarves were courting death and activated Avatar, at this time, no dwarf in the world would be that tall. Faced with this extremely surging power coming at them at high speed, every orc only had two choices. One was to be like a heroic orc and fight head-on. The other was to lower their noble heads and avoid it. The choice that Orgrim wanted Duque to make was copied and pasted by Duque, and sent back to him. Orgrim hesitated. It was another choice between life and death. He could indeed tell himself, I am the great chief, I should save my life, lower my head a little, and reorganize the orcs. As an invader, we will be successful even if we keep the rule of a continent. But if he did this, would he still be considered a brave orc? Would those heroic tribal warriors still treat him as the pride of their tribe? No. Orcs could accept defeat. Orcs could die in battle, but orcs would never allow cowardice. Hammer of Destruction, had long been sent flying to who knew where. Just like that, Orgrim strode forward, and with a straight punch, he blasted out what might be the last attack of his life. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. Two burly figures suddenly appeared in front of Orgrim, blocking his path. In less than a tenth of a second, the first figure was suddenly hit by the arcane energy. Orgrim could clearly see that the orc's body instantly crumbled into pieces. And the second figure, which was much larger than the orc, was blasted away by Duque's power, crashing into the cave wall beside Orgrim and deeply embedded into it. At this moment, the weakened arcane energy finally landed on Orgrim, You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.